You look at the countries that have accepted the invitation to be part of it. You think, well, these are not necessarily countries that ought to be running an international organisation. I'm not saying that to insult them, but you think, well, what is the point of this? If it really is supposed to be something that runs in tandem with the United Nations, well, you could say fair enough. But it seems clear that it's meant to be a lot more than that. Well, Yvette Cooper, the British Foreign Secretary, she's been in Davos this week as well. As we know, the Prime Minister hasn't been. And she explained this morning why Putin's involvement in Trump's board of peace is a red line for the UK.
Is Putin serious about peace? Because I haven't yet seen any signs that he is. That is what we need to see. I still think we're going to need more pressure on Russia to bring them to the table. Really, Putin needs to now show he is ready for peace.
The very thought that you would invite someone like Vladimir Putin to be part of something called a board of peace, I mean, it's risible in itself, isn't it? But then you look down the list of other countries that are meant to be involved. Belarus. Mr. Lukashenko has been invited to take part and, of course, has said yes. I do not understand why any serious Western country would want to be involved in this. But then, of course, if we say no, then we risk snubbing Donald Trump, or that's how he would see it anyway. But have we got to the point where, frankly, it doesn't matter? Where, frankly, we have to look at the British national interest. And I would submit to you that it is not in our interest to spend £750 million of UK taxpayers' money on something that will inevitably be controlled by Donald Trump. He will be chairman of the board, but he would be one of those chairman of the boards whose writ would be writ large. He would want his own way, and woe betide anyone that would stand in his way. 0345 6060 973. However, Donald Trump has put forward what he thinks this new board can offer to the world, given the claims that the UN isn't succeeding in stopping conflicts.
I've always said the United Nations has got tremendous potential, has not used it, but there's tremendous potential with the United Nations. And I think the combination of the Board of Peace with the kind of people we have here, coupled with the United Nations, can be something very, very unique for the world. It's for the world. This isn't United States. This is for the world.
So I think if this had stuck by the original concept of being a Gaza reconstruction board, which Tony Blair has been invited to join, I mean, that's another question for you, given what it's now become. Should Tony Blair pull out of doing this? But if it had stayed a Gaza reconstruction board, you could see that might have been something worth taking part in. It might have been worth Britain being part of. But given what it seems to have morphed into, do you think it is in Britain's interest to be part of it or not? 0345 6060 973. Well, Salman Sheikh joins me now, founder and chief executive of the diplomacy-focused consultancy organisation, the Sheikh Group, who previously directed the Brookings Doha Centre and worked extensively for the United Nations in the Middle East, including in Palestine. Salman, very good evening. Why do you think this has apparently morphed into something totally different from what it was originally billed to be?
Well, I think it shows President Trump unrestrained. He, of course, sees himself, I think, as the king of peace. I think this is, talking to people in Washington, it is definitely his mindset and something that he has campaigned on. Of course, it's very far from the truth. He's built his values on might is right, that there are spheres of influence in the world. And he, I think, is promoting himself from being a hemispherical president of just the Americas to, I think, now a world leader in the true sense for him. And so I think that's why he's doing it. In doing so, he's tearing up the Atlantic Charter, the UN Charter, which had real heavyweight members at the start, the United States, Soviet Union, France, the UK, and instead, as you said, invited these people onto this particular board. I think it shows a president who's unrestrained.
And the countries that he's invited to join it, I mean, are mostly countries that are in some way either friendly to him or friendly to Vladimir Putin. I mean, it's extraordinary that he's even invited Putin to be a member of it. He must know that most European countries will not want anything to do with something that Putin is involved with.
Yes, he does. But this, again, reflects his mindset, which is about bringing strong men as part of this. That's the reason why he's invited Putin. He's also invited these Arab states and Muslim majority states, 9 of them. Now, they have different motivation. They're focused on Gaza, and they think this is still the best way of trying to influence Trump in going forward on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And then there are others like Argentina and Paraguay and others who basically just get access to Trump. They're all sort of a melee of interest here as to who he's been able to assemble. It's also, of course, includes Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, you've mentioned President Putin, but also Benjamin Netanyahu is also indicted by the International Criminal Court. So it again shows that international law is not the driving force of this. It's Trump's law.
What about the finances of this? I mean, if people want apparently member states are given renewable 3-year terms and permanent seats are available to those contributing $1 billion. Why would anyone contribute that kind of money to something like this? And why would it even require that kind of money to exist?
I think this is still an ambiguous point. I'm not sure which countries are actually fronting up $1 billion to start with. Founding members may well have an exemption in that respect. And of course, Putin, if he does join, which he may not, but he's putting forward this idea that you can use the Russian frozen assets to contribute to his $1 billion as necessary. And of course, who holds the purse strings? It's President Trump. There's a lot of ambiguity on this particular point of financing, and we'll see what actually they're able to collect. Not least for what happens in Gaza.
What happens if Britain actually does in the end say, nope, we're not joining? How will that affect relations between this country and Donald Trump, do you think?
I think right now, Prime Minister Starmer has been right to focus on Greenland and also the rule of law and international law. Now, Britain's not always been consistent in that itself, but I think those are principles which it should stick up for. There's no guarantee, Iain, that this Board of Peace is actually going to last that long. Its first task is to improve markedly the situation in Gaza. We saw Jared Kushner today make an extraordinary presentation, presenting essentially the new Riviera of the Middle East in Gaza. Having lived and worked there, and talked also to many people since those plans came out, there's a lot of skepticism that these will actually materialize. So if I was the UK Prime Minister and the UK government, I'd watch to see how this develops. That's the first task of the Board of Peace, and stay away from real problematic issues around how this treats international law.
And what about the role of Tony Blair here? Has he actually formally accepted this role or not?
Well, he's not on the Board of Peace. By the way, it's no longer called the Gaza Board of Peace. He's on this executive board, which is supposed to advise the principals, those sort of countries that we saw lined up today. So yes, he's a member of that. He's also a member of the Gaza board. So there's actually 3 layers as such. I frankly don't understand why Tony Blair is there. I still view him as one of the most gifted politicians that the UK has had. But when it came to Iraq and when it comes to his involvement in the Middle East, I think I'm not the only one who would say it's been rather checkered. And him getting himself involved here, does that also belie other interests, which link to funders and the corporatists and others who are also involved in this whole enterprise?
Thank you very much indeed for joining us there. That's Salman Sheikh from the Sheikh Group. Now, I'm going to issue a challenge to you now because we have been unable to find anyone who thinks that Britain should join up to this Board of Peace. So if there's anybody listening who thinks that we should join up to it, be my guest, dial the number 0345 6060 973 and we'll put you on air because I suspect that most of the phone calls are going to be one-way traffic here. I do like to try and provide some sort of balance when I introduce the programme and the subject that we're talking about, but sometimes you just can't find anyone who's willing to put the other point of view. So it's up to you, basically. 0345 6060 973. It's 16 minutes past 7 on LBC.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
They have fatal incompetence.
Straight to the point.
What is the problem they've got over there?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
The country's going backwards. Growth down. Energy prices up.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
When you
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
18 minutes past 7. You know, when I was listening to Salman there, a thought struck me when he was talking about Donald Trump's role as world leader. I just remember that remark from Boris Johnson in his childhood where he said, I want to be world king. It seems to me that that is applicable to Donald Trump here, that he thinks that he is almost omnipotent, that he can solve any conflict in the world. And I suspect he thinks his Board of Peace is just a fig leaf, that it'll still be him doing the legwork on solving any international crisis. But we know that the 8 wars that he says that he's brought to an end, certainly some of them, he's either had a very tangential role or no role at all. There are others where he can legitimately lay claim to having done that. I think the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia is one where he can legitimately say that he had an integral role in bringing that to an end. But some of the others, I don't really think so. And I wonder what the reaction of the United Nations is to this, because so far I haven't heard a peep out of the United Nations. Antonio Guterres, a man never normally stuck for words, he doesn't seem to have commented on it, which you would have thought he would, given that it has to be seen, this border peace, it has to be seen as something that is in direct conflict with the United Nations Security Council. But how do you think it could operate in the future? I mean, if you look down the list of countries that are involved, I mean, they're not a prime example of the world's greatest democracies. Some of them are democracies. Many of them are not. Many of them have very dubious human rights records, for example. So I struggle to believe that this can have any great traction at all if it doesn't include any of the main Western European countries. I mean, it has got countries from Asia, it's got countries from South America. But where are the European countries apart from Hungary? And we all know that Viktor Orban is at least not an opponent of Vladimir Putin, He's very close to Donald Trump. That has to be said. And he's basically against NATO policy towards Ukraine. So that doesn't fill anybody with any great degree of confidence, does it? Let's go to Peter in Fulham. Hello, Peter.
Good evening. How you doing?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
I'd just like to say that it's like a little boy in a comic strip, isn't it, really? You know, you got this big clown running around the world telling everyone how great he is. But in fact, he's not. He's got 2 or 3 people that are obviously quite close to him. Putin, Netanyahu, Orban, all the people that we don't particularly want around. And then I would imagine that the others are there just to see what's going on, to get close to him, to maybe try and make some effort. I mean, I was quite impressed yesterday with Rutte when he called him out about the NATO Article 5. I think maybe there's people around that should be calling him out now about this and just stopping it where it is.
Well, he should be called out about that, because let's just remind people what that is. Article 5 has only ever been invoked once in the history of NATO, and that was by the United States in 2001 after 9/11. Donald Trump seemed to have completely forgotten about that when he said that, we've come to Europe's aid in the past, but I doubt whether European countries would come to our aid. Well, we did in 2001, and indeed 467 British servicemen and women lost their lives in Afghanistan. Let's also point out that there are, I think, 43 Danish soldiers who lost their lives in Afghanistan. Actually, a higher proportion, if you look at it per 100,000 of population, than either Britain or, I think, indeed the United States lost in Afghanistan. So it's so insulting when he comes out with these things, isn't it? And so Mark Rutte, credit him for putting him right on that.
I also think that, as you rightly say, Gualtieri should be up there. Should be banging on the table.
Who?
What is going on? You're trying to take the world over. It was initially for Gaza, which is probably not a bad idea. But the minute you start bringing people like Putin into the picture, Orban, it just tells me that it's not serious at all. It's just an ego trip for him to get as many people around. And I really hope that we, as a nation, and all of the other European nations, just walk away from this, completely walk away from it. I don't think it serves any purpose for other than him. And, you know, the more credible the countries that sign up to this, the bigger his ego is going to be. We need to just stay out of this now. Just let him get on with it, because I don't see it lasting. I just don't see it lasting. And the more people around the table, the harder it is to get an agreement. And I think with some of the Middle East countries there, the money speaks. I just think it's not going to be anything like it should be. It should go back to Gaza, try and get that sorted out. It just looks like a money-making machine, and he's the banker. It's a game of Monopoly. I'm the banker. I'm keeping all the money. I'm running the game. Yeah, I just think it's a very sad situation for the world.
There are 2 other points to bring into this. One is that I wonder whether this is the first step in him really seriously trying to undermine the United Nations. Now, the United Nations does a very good job of undermining itself, it has to be said. It is, to my mind, a bit of a failing organisation. But it's the only game in town, or at least it was until this Board of Peace was formed. Yeah, so, I mean, I wonder how you think maybe the UN can make itself more relevant than it has been, maybe in quite a few conflicts. But second of all, and I'm really playing devil's advocate here because I don't believe this is what should happen, but there will be some people who say, well, actually, all the European countries should sign up to this to try and shape it rather than leave it to some of these despotic countries and indeed Donald Trump.
Maybe. I don't know. But I think it would need everybody to go, wouldn't it? Everyone to sign it, not just maybe us and maybe the French or however it was. They need to go as a group. But just one other very quick point. If it ever gets raised again, what we should do with regards to Trump and taking things over, maybe we should try and take over his golf clubs in Scotland. And that might just... that
can
might
you imagine?
No, I can, because I think he would really start crying. I think, you know...
Maybe we should nationalise them.
Yeah, why not? Let's do that. Great idea. Yeah, well, then we'll see what kind of game he wants to play, and how many dummies he's got in his pocket, I guess. But there we are. So.
Quite a few. Right. I don't know if you've seen any of these memes on Instagram where a parent puts a copy of the Nobel Peace Prize on a table, and their 18-month-old child tries to grab it, and the parent says, "No, leave it alone." And the child just screams and screams. I mean, they're very, very funny, aren't they?
Very quickly, have you seen the haircut one today?
No.
Okay, Gigi, ping. See if you can find it.
Okay.
Ping cutting his hair. Brilliant.
Right.
So, okay.
Peter, thank you very much. Dennis says, we cannot join a board of peace that includes Russia and Belarus. We cannot join it while Trump is acting like the playground bully. It will hurt, but we must start saying no to Trump. Trump will not last. The US and EU-UK relationship will outlast. Right, Lee is in Frankfurt. Hi, Lee.
Yeah, hi, Ian. How are you doing? I mean,
Good, thank you.
Next TV episode today. This is just patently ridiculous. If you actually read the charter that the UN has distributed, worth noting that the US withdrew from 60 UN organisations about 10 days ago. So he is trying to undermine the UN. If you look at the charter, he does control. Your last caller was absolutely right. He's the banker. It's personal control forever. So it's not attached to the US president. It's offshore held money is what it says in the actual charter. So it's not held in the US. You've also got the fact that he chooses his successor and has sole sign-off on all spending decisions.
And he's acting like an emperor, isn't he? He's an emperor without an empire.
Yeah, I mean, on a more serious note, it's clearly breaching the FCPA Act in the US.
What's that?
Well, it's one of the measures. There's about 4 measures, the Constitution, everything down, to prevent corruption and bribery of US president. Now he's stepped over that, obviously, with the Qatar jet and everything else that happened, and the Venezuelan oil held in Qatar, the revenues from the oil sale, the crypto grift, and all that happened. That's all held in the BVI, which I can just mention briefly. I think the next target's coming up on his little toy shopping is the UK tax havens, Bermuda, including Bermuda and the reinsurance industry, and possibly the Falklands for Milai.
Well, the world order really is changing. If you're right on all of that, and look, I can't argue against you. I can't say that you might not be right. I hope you wouldn't be right on all of those things. But even if you're right on a couple.
Well, they don't benefit as overseas territories from NATO protection, unfortunately. So it's the UK and the US having that debate directly. But where do you think the crypto money is held, given Binance, which is the exchange they used on the meme coin and Melania's meme coin and the deals the kids and the Witkoffs did? Binance is registered in the British Virgin Islands. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost impossible now. If I was working for one of the big insurance companies or the big banks, where they employ people to be political risk experts, because they then have to use the information that these experts give to come up with insurance premiums. Yeah. I mean, political risk people are almost going to be irrelevant over the next few years, because there is no way that anybody can predict anything with any degree of certainty.
Okay, one final little tidbit today. Trump just launched a $5 billion debanking lawsuit against JP Morgan.
Just explain what that means.
So he's suing JP Morgan for debanking him in his bankrupt businesses and career in the past. So this guy, this president and this administration is about to sue JP Morgan.
For what?
For debanking him when all the businesses were going bankrupt and the real estate disasters happened and the casinos. JP Morgan is one of the big US banks that just walked away from him, and then Deutsche stepped in to refinance, and then Deutsche stepped away.
And so you're saying that the US government, as opposed to Donald Trump himself, is launching this lawsuit?
Well, how does he launch his lawsuits? With the assistance of the Department of Justice.
Well, it's quite incredible that a president, while in office, can even launch a lawsuit like this.
Well, indeed, right? But it's not stopped him. What's he done so far? I think he's up to 192 so far in 1 year.
It really is a different world, isn't it? And
it's shifting, and it really is.
I wonder how we can actually get used to that, because I think there are too many people, certainly in this country, who think that things will revert to normal at some point. But it's quite difficult to imagine that happening in the circumstances of that happening. I mean, even if Donald Trump left office tomorrow, Trumpism would still be there, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the cleanup is going to take years. I mean, over a decade, right, potentially. But you've got all the prosecutions that are going to happen through the DOJ, the IRS, the SEC, the FAA, with the media deals, the law firms that folded up. The mess that's been created in the US justice system and commercial system is just massive.
Well, thank you very much. Very, very interesting call, Lee. Hope to hear from you again at some point in the future. Sam says, Trump's reasons for going into Greenland was to protect them from Russia and China, yet in the next breath, he's trying to make a border peace with Russia on it. I just don't understand how that makes sense. Well, you and me both, Sam. 0345 6060 973. Should Britain have anything to do with Trump's board for peace? Or do you think that maybe, we should just join it at the beginning and see what happens so we can actually influence it rather than just stand on the sidelines and carping? That is a point of view. It's not one I subscribe to. I just don't see how on earth we can put our names to anything like this at all. Now, also, we're going to hear from Aggie Chambray in a moment, our deputy political editor, because almost half of the local authorities in England, which were due to hold elections this spring, have now had them postponed. I think this is a constitutional outrage, and we will hear from Aggie as to what it all means, and she'll also bring us up to date with whether Andy Burnham will stand in this by-election that is due in one of the Manchester constituencies after the local MP announced he was standing down today. It's 7:31. Let's get the LBC News headlines with Amelia Cox.
Officials from Ukraine, Russia and the US will hold their first trilateral talks tomorrow. Volodymyr Zelensky has confirmed the meeting during a speech to world leaders in Davos following discussions with Donald Trump. Britain will not yet sign up to Donald Trump's so-called Board of Peace due to concerns about Vladimir Putin's possible involvement. The Kremlin says the Russian president is still considering the offer. And Andrew Gwynn has announced he's standing down as an MP, paving a possible return to Westminster for Andy Burnham. The independent member for Gorton and Denton was sacked as a health minister last year for offensive WhatsApp messages. LBC weather, clearer skies for a time in southern and central areas tonight. More rain moving into the southwest overnight and staying wet and windy further north, a low of 1.
LBC. Dale on LBC.
7:34 on LBC. Let me tell you who's on Cross Question at 8. We have the political commentator and columnist for the London Standard, Emily Sheffield. Baroness Mary Bousted. I always say Bousted. It's actually Boasted, isn't it? Or is it? I don't know. Anyway, we will find out. She's been on the programme so often, I suppose I ought to really know that. She is a Labour peer, also former General Secretary of the National Education Union. Baroness Natalie Bennett, she's a Green Party peer, former leader of the Green Party. And Steve Baker, the former Conservative MP and Minister. They'll be here answering your questions from 8 o'clock. As you know, you do now, we are now broadcasting Cross Question 4 days a week, 8 to 9, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which gives more opportunities for Aggie Chambray, LBC's Deputy Political Editor, to be a guest, but not tonight. You are a valued guest on this hour, though, because I want to talk to you about two things. First of all, the postponement of all these local elections. Now, it's been expected, but I regard this as a bit of a constitutional outrage. But why is the government saying that it isn't?
Well, what the government is saying is they are pushing through, and this bit is definitely true, they are pushing through major changes to how local councils operate. So they are merging two-tier systems, county and district, into unitary authorities and creating new elected mayors as well. Their argument is, because this is not done yet, if they were to have these elections this year and then the system changed, they would effectively have to have the elections again next year, which they say would be a waste of money. So they are effectively leaving it up to the local councils on whether or not they choose to delay. Steve Reid, who is the local government minister, wrote to 63 councils to ask whether or not they wanted to delay. And he came back and said that 29 of them did want to postpone elections. So in areas where those elections are postponed, councillors will have their terms extended for a short period. And once the new unitary councils are agreed, they will hold the elections to those in 2027 next year. But,
or will they?
Well,
I say this because we had this argument last year, didn't they? They postponed some elections last year for the same reason. So you'll have some councils, and I think mine's one of them, where there'll be 2 years without any elections.
And that was actually the argument made by Robert Jenrick, who, of course, was the Shadow Deputy Secretary for the Conservatives until last week, and he's now a key member of Reform UK. He was actually speaking in the Commons earlier today, and he said, look, when we did this, because the Conservatives did do this when he was Community Secretary, they delayed local elections in authorities where authorities could be abolished. But he said, look, we spoke to the government lawyers, and they advised us that we should not do this twice. And this is him speaking in the Commons.
What the Secretary of State is doing is almost certainly illegal. If he's so confident of his position, publish his legal advice and publish the legal advice that I received and the Prime Minister when we decided not to delay for a second year. Then we might be able to have faith in what he's saying.
Well, Iain, we will actually soon find out whether or not it is illegal, because Reform UK have launched a legal challenge. That is now going to be heard. We think it'll be 2 days on February 19th. But it's not just Robert Jenrick. The Liberal Democrats, the Conservatives too, are being very, 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 very critical of this decision. Lib Dems saying that the Labour government is running scared of this. So I'm sure this is not the end of this. And as I say, next month we will hear whether or not they're actually allowed to do this or not.
And of these 29 councils that are postponing, over half, I think it's 15, so just over half, are Labour-controlled authorities.
Well, it's actually more than that, Iain. So I think that's outright. But if you look at coalition, then it's actually 21 out of 29 councils are Labour-led. But obviously those are the councils that have asked to have that delayed. And there are Conservative-led too. There's around 4 and a couple Liberal Democrats, and the others are no overall control.
And the suspicion is here that whether it's a Labour council wanting to delay or a Conservative or a Liberal Democrat, they're running frit of reform.
Well, that's the accusation. Yes, that's very much what the Liberal Democrats are saying, although obviously 2 of those are Liberal Democrat led. But that is very much the accusation. And, you know, we may be in a different place by May 2027, where actually Labour are doing better in the polls and they do better out of this. But I should say, again, the argument they are making is this is just about the fact that they are merging these 2 systems into unitary authorities. But I think the accusations, Iain, are going to keep coming and coming.
Well, when you look at this new poll that's out tonight, it's by an organisation I've never heard of, but they did bring out a poll last month. And this new poll that's come out shows Reform up 4 points to 32%. The Conservatives, I think, are on 18, down 1. And Labour are behind the Greens. Greens are on 17 and Labour on 14. Now, I've got no idea how accurate their polls are. But I mean, that is going to fuel these suspicions that this is partly a political decision, which Steve Reed, the Communities and Local Government Secretary, he absolutely denies.
He absolutely denies that. That's right. I mean, all of the polls that we have seen in recent months have been absolutely terrible for Labour. And I mean, I haven't seen that poll. That sounds fascinating. I think what actually we have been seeing in consistent polls is Reform doing slightly worse, and actually the Conservatives doing better. But that is fascinating. And as you say, people will be looking to polls, as they often do. Some say actually politicians look to polls too often, but they'll be looking at those polls and actually wondering how they can get a better handle on things.
Now, one politician who'll be looking at polls tonight, particularly in the Greater Manchester area, will be the King of the North, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham. Pray why?
Well, because his route to getting a Westminster seat has just become slightly easier. So Andrew Gwynn, who was a Labour minister until February last year, when he was found to have written these comments in a WhatsApp group called Trigger Me Timbers, which were deemed to be extremely offensive. I should say he apologised profusely then and actually today again, but he lost his job as a minister then. And basically since that point and him losing the Labour whip, there's been these question marks over whether he and Andy Burnham might do some sort of deal. So Andy Burnham, who at the moment he's the Mayor of Greater Manchester. If you're the Mayor of Greater Manchester, you can't challenge the Prime Minister down in Westminster. So there has been this talk that maybe there'd be some deal. Until today, it has been denied. But today, Andrew Gwynn has confirmed that he is absolutely standing down. He's blamed ill health for that and, again, apologised profusely.
I think he's produced a doctor's note as well,
He's produced a note from his GP, but he's basically going to go to medical retirement now. He's going to get a pension from the House of Commons, probably as a result of that GP note that he published on Facebook too. And now Andy Burnham has cleared one of those hurdles, should he choose to run. We do not know yet whether he is going to run, because there are lots and lots and lots more hurdles for him to get through. So he would have to get through 2 stages of National Executive Committee stages. At the moment, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has a majority on the National Executive Committee, and he basically would have to get this special dispensation to actually stand down as mayor, stand as candidate, and people I've spoken to on the NEC are just not sure that is going to happen. And then, of course, he'd have to actually win that by-election should he become the candidate. And Reform UK, as we have just been talking about, may well win that seat.
Well, because they are in second place.
They're in second place. So I think it was Labour had 18,000 in the last election, and Reform UK had 5,000. But because the polls have shifted so much, you could well see Reform UK winning that seat.
I think it would be absolutely barking mad to go for this seat, given the demographics there, given the popularity of Reform at the moment. And also, it's quite difficult for him to explain doing this. If he says, well, I'm doing it because I'm doing it for the country, I think a lot of people are going to turn around and say, mate, you're costing the taxpayer £500,000 because there'll have to be a mayoral by-election as well. And I don't think anybody thinks that would be a good idea.
I don't think he can be blamed for Andrew Gwynn standing down for the finances of that, but they've talked about how much it's going to cost to have that mayoral by-election if he were to stand down. I have spoken to a lot of people, Labour MPs, who basically think that the one Labour person that could win a by-election in that area is Andy Burnham. So they've always said to me, look, we think if he stood in a by-election, he would win it. They don't know that for sure. And, we just talked about the polls. He may well not win. But NEC people that I've spoken to today and Labour sources have said very similar to you, said he would be nuts to try. And also, if he tries and he doesn't get it, if he doesn't win the by-election, he would sort of lose some of his momentum. But it's also a dangerous moment for Keir Starmer, because if Andy Burnham were to become the candidate and then eventually to become an MP, well, maybe he would then challenge the Prime Minister. And then, that's why people on the NEC, I think some people think, would want to block him.
Well, if he does go for it and win, he becomes king over the water as opposed to king of the north. And if he goes for it, or if he doesn't go for it, he's still seen as king over the water, isn't he?
Yes, although lots of people in Westminster are very keen for him, his allies in Westminster are very keen for him to return to Westminster and to challenge the Prime Minister. And I think there would be lots of people who would be disappointed. But I think for Keir Starmer, I mean, one Labour source said to me today, if he even becomes the candidate in Gorton and Denton, the Prime Minister, just like that, becomes a lame duck Prime Minister. And their point was that if Andy Burnham challenges the Prime Minister, or at least even if people think he's going to challenge the Prime Minister, other Labour MPs who are vying for that top spot then would also challenge the Prime Minister, or at least try and challenge the Prime Minister. And it would feel to a lot of people like the race was very much on if Andy Burnham was looking like he was about to make a return to Westminster.
Just finally, you're much closer to the gossip among Labour MPs than I am, but my instinct is that he's not as popular among Labour MPs as many people think he is.
Iain, you're saying things tonight that literally it sounds like you're a Labour MP who's spoken to me earlier. I feel like that's the second time someone else.
Well, I'm just thinking there's several Labour MPs or politicians that I know, and they think that Andy Burnham's a completely empty vessel.
Well, I mean, look, he has got his supporters in the Labour Party. He really, really, really does. But there are lots of people who are real detractors. I mean, one of these people said to me earlier today, he thinks he's got all these supporters in the PLP talking about the Parliamentary Labour Party, and he actually doesn't. So you know, would he have enough support to actually challenge the Prime Minister even? That's 80 named MPs. I think probably, especially if the soft left of the party coalesced just around him, which again, probably that would happen. But I should add at the moment, we don't even know whether he's going to stand in that by-election. He hasn't said either way yet. He said he was in the dark about the Andrew Gwynn decision. But we don't even know whether he would, and he hasn't said either way yet. And we don't know whether he would want to challenge the Prime Minister were he to get into Westminster. But I think there are lots of people in the Labour Party who are his allies who would want him to.
See, I think you've been channeling Donald Rumsfeld in that answer, sort of the known unknowns and the unknown knowns. Aggie, thank you very much indeed. That's Aggie Chambray, LBC's Deputy Political Editor. We'll come back to your calls on Donald Trump's Board for Peace in just a moment. Jim says this border peace is a joke. How on earth can one of the main architects of the disastrous illegal war in Iraq be anywhere near this deal? He made billions out of destroying the Middle East. Now he wants more money to fix his own evil wrongdoing. The Tony Blair Institute is a disgrace. Well, of course, we heard earlier from our guest that Tony Blair won't be on this actual border peace. He'll be on the Gaza reconstruction bit of it, if you follow what I mean. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 7:47.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
President Trump yesterday doing what he does best, making news at home.
President Trump standing before the world and putting it on notice. He's not backing off at all in terms of his ambition to take control of Greenland.
And away.
Well, let's get back to the breaking news now that Donald Trump says a framework deal has been reached over Greenland.
Look what he's achieved. He's possibly on the verge of doing a deal that will give him maybe a Cyprus-style deal for Greenland. In a world now where you have dictators like Putin, President Xi, Kim Jong-un and all the others just doing what the United Kingdom does, which is continually referring to international law, isn't going to cut it.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
The following
Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:51 on LBC. Now, on what our caller Lee raised just before 7:30 about Trump suing the bank JP Morgan, the president has personally sued both JP Morgan Chase and its chief executive for at least $5 billion. Now, he has, as Lee said, accused JP Morgan Chase of debanking him after the January the 6th riot on Capitol Hill in 2021. Now, earlier this month, Trump claimed the bank had incorrectly and inappropriately discriminated against him. The lawsuit was filed by Trump's personal lawyer, who's based in Miami, and that's the same lawyer who filed the lawsuit against the BBC over the Panorama documentary about that January the 6th riot. What a tangled web we weave. Rachel says the UK is right to decline the invitation to join Trump's peace board. To me, this looks like another financial racket. Corruption at its finest. The UK doesn't need to provide reasons for not joining, doesn't need to suggest that Putin's membership would be problematic. We should be simply saying thank you for the invitation, but no thank you. The UK needs to give Trump and his shenanigans a wide berth. Well, that seems to be the consensus of virtually everybody that's texting in at the moment and indeed calling in. I reissue my challenge. We've got 8 minutes to find somebody who wants to phone in and say, Iain, you're wrong. We should be joining the peace board. Where are all of you MAGA supporters? I don't know. Let's go to Hugo in Tunbridge. Hello, Hugo.
Hello, Iain. Good evening.
Hi.
I'm not quite MAGA full on, but however,
not quite.
The disagreement on sovereignty of Greenland has obviously raised blood pressures and also sort of muddied opinion this week. And I'm not saying we should have joined today. However, I quite understand why President Trump and his administration are sort of frustrated with the existing institutions and also the current posture of its European allies, including the UK government. And it's in that context that I'm going to suggest that the UK should actually keep our options open for potential membership in due course, especially given we're outside of some key influential structures such as the European Union at this stage. I'm happy to dive into any of that.
Well, please do.
I'm just going to say that I think the frustration of the Trump administration, which has been very clear and in evidence at Davos throughout the week, if not for the past year, and also interestingly echoed by President Zelensky this evening as to the performance of European allies in providing for defence and security, is that we really need a reality check and a wake-up call as to the pace of how we're investing in our defence and foreign policy machinery in this context. And it is in this changed context that Trump is setting up new structures to manage the turbulent state of the global international order. And I think the challenge he lays down, despite the noise and despite the obvious intrusions in certain aspects that will, as I say, raise our blood pressure, it's incumbent on us, I think, to ensure that our governments are accelerating at the pace that they need to, and they're simply not at the moment.
Well, maybe, and I don't disagree with that last bit. But what is the point of joining something which effectively Donald Trump has 100% control over? He controls who's on it, who's invited to be on it. He controls the finances. All of his decisions are final. That's what, according to Lee in Frankfurt, the full paper says, which I admit I haven't read the whole thing. I mean, it just seems to be yet another Donald Trump vanity project.
Well, there's no doubt that his personality is at the centre of this organisation. However, I would add that the UK, post-Brexit in particular, has to craft now a foreign policy that is going to leverage its influence in multiple different alliance structures. In considering potential membership of this one, I think obviously we need to look at the terms of reference. We really need to understand the payment, just like we would any other international organisation, as to the benefits for national security and defence for potentially joining in that. And perhaps the part involvement of the former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, can give us some sort of idea and indication as to the direction of travel. But on principle, I don't think we can rule it out in the context. Also, if we want to leverage our influence, how do we feel about other strong voices within the tent influencing the US administration from within when we're outside of it. I think that's a relevant consideration for this as well. I'm not saying that we can't, we shouldn't have appropriate discussion and debate as to the purpose of this option. But as you say, I think we all need to read it, understand its constitution. We may not like some of the members within it, but if there's a peace deal over Ukraine next, are we seriously saying we're not going to be discussing with other governments how it is that this international order is going to be pursued, and that we're not going to maintain dialogue with the US administration? And I just don't think we can rule that out and have to take these things on a case-by-case basis.
Well, I think the crowning thing for me was when I heard that he was going to be chairman of this board for life, which, I mean, it's just so preposterous, isn't it? Because what about the next US president? I mean, say J.D. Vance becomes US president in 2029. Surely he would expect to take that over. That's why it can only be seen as a vanity project. This is from Penn, who says, I listen to your informed and considered political commentary, but tonight you're making me laugh out loud. Oh dear. Britain and the EU absolutely must distance themselves from the Board of Peace. I think I've said that. Indicted war criminals and despots answerable to an utterly unhinged king of the world. How do Steve Miller, Caroline Levitt, Marco and J.D. Vance maintain any domestic political credibility? By the way, Taco didn't call Greenland Iceland. A few million of us misheard. Ironic. Fantastic analysis and commentary by LBC and you this week. Well, thank you, Penn. She says... Is it a she or a he? You're a voice of reason in a world of madness. Well, I'm not sure everybody would agree with that, but thank you for the compliment. Right, let's finish off the hour with Hakeem in Manchester. Hakeem, very good evening. You're a first-time caller. What would you like to say?
Hi there. Good evening, Ian. A new listener and loving the show. My biggest concern with the Board of Peace is it being filled with individuals or titles? Because the one thing that gives the UN legitimacy by being a government organisation is that the administrations change based on the democratic will of the country at the time.
Yeah.
Is this a play for Donald Trump? So I believe that due process will go ahead in the United States and he won't be a president with a third term. So is this an angle for him to say, OK, well, I'll keep this and merge it into an organisation that does challenge the UN and it becomes somewhat the president of the world?
Well, and challenges the next president of the United States, particularly if it's a Democratic one.
Indeed. I think he will always challenge it. I think he will, similarly to January 6th, I personally have the opinion he did incite to riot on the Capitol. So then I think that will occur again. But this is a sort of, how would you say, a backup plan for him keeping his grip on power.
Well, we always like original views on this programme. Your first-time call has provided one, Hakeem. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry it was so short, but we'll have you on again very, very soon, I'm sure. Right, coming up in the next hour, it is Cross Question on a Thursday night with Emily Sheffield, political commentator and columnist for the London Standard, Baroness Mary Boasted, who is Labour peer and also former General Secretary of the National Education Union, Baroness Natalie Bennett. Two baronesses on the show tonight. We are going up in the world socially, aren't we? She is a Green Party peer who's a former leader of the Greens. And Steve Baker, former Conservative MP and Minister. They are about to enter the studio to answer your questions live on LBC. The number you can call 0345 6060 973. And if you're not watching us on Global Player, the LBC app, or the LBC YouTube channel, I'd like a doctor's note, please.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, Ukraine's leader, President Zelensky, has criticised Europe's efforts against Vladimir Putin as he addressed world leaders in Davos. He told the summit that nothing had changed since he last spoke in Switzerland as he appeared to defend Donald Trump.
President Trump led an operation in Venezuela and Maduro was arrested, and there were different opinions about it. But the fact remains, Maduro is on trial in New York. Sorry, but Putin is not on trial.
He also revealed the first trilateral talks between the US, Russia and Ukraine will take place tomorrow. Meanwhile, the French president revealed they've intercepted a sanctioned Russian tanker in the Mediterranean. The French mission was conducted with the UK, which gathered and shared intelligence. Britain's avoiding signing up to Donald Trump's Board of Peace due to concerns over President Putin's possible involvement. Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper says the UK will look at how else it can play a supportive role in the Gaza peace process. And suspended Labour MP Andrew Gwyn's confirmed he'll stand down from Parliament on health grounds. There are rumours potential leadership challenger Andy Burnham will fight for the vacant Greater Manchester seat. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 11 points at 10,150. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.14. LBC weather. Clearer in southern and central areas tonight, staying wet and windy further north, a low of 1 degree. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
Taking antibiotics when you don't need them puts you and your family at risk of a longer and more severe illness. Always take your doctor's advice. Search NHS antibiotics.
You saw me walking along the beach. You watched me turn round the headland, and the tide, it cut me off. The rocks were wet, too wet to climb, so I panicked. But you didn't. You dialed 999 and asked for the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
And I just want to say, whoever you are, thank you.
In an emergency at the coast, call 999 and ask for the Coast Guard.
I'm a real snack monster. But Mum and Dad says all that munching isn't good for me. Around half the sugar we eat comes from unhealthy snacks and sugary drinks. If you want to change from a snack monster to a snack star, search Change for Life for loads of healthy snacking ideas.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello and a warm welcome to Thursday's Cross Question with me, Iain Dale. On the panel with me tonight, to my left, Baroness Mary Boustert, Labour peer, who's also former General Secretary of the National Education Union. Next to her is former Conservative MP Steve Baker. To my right, another Baroness, Natalie Bennett, Green Party peer, former leader of the Greens. And next to her, somebody who no doubt will be a Baroness in the future, certainly deserves to be, Emily Sheffield, political commentator and columnist for the London Standard. They are, of course, here to hear what you've got to say, to answer your questions. The number to call 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us on that number and you can text 84850. And, of course, you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
Well, let's start off with a question from Nikki in Kent. It's on WhatsApp. She says, why would anyone expect the UK or Europe to join a so-called Board of Peace populated by tyrants, dictators, indicted war criminals and convicted felons? Why would any democracy seek legitimacy in that company? Steve Baker.
Well, it's a very good question indeed, isn't it? And it's probably the first time I've looked at something done by Yvette Cooper and thought it was quite sensible, because she put off joining it in case Putin joined it. I mean, what an extraordinary thing, though, that Trump is trying to set himself up as a man of peace and go for a peace prize when he's only just threatened to take a NATO ally's territory by force. I mean, this is a really outlandish situation, and I'm not surprised that I've started seeing journalists write world crisis. International affairs are going absolutely haywire, and that is an exceptionally good question.
What's his motivation for creating this so-called Board of Peace, do you think?
Do you know, it's very hard to tell with Trump and some of his motivations. I don't know. I mean, you'd like to think it was in good faith to bring peace. But
Sorry.
I mean, I just don't know, honestly. I couldn't say.
You see, I think he's given the game away, where he says that he will be chairman of this board for life.
Yeah, of course, El Presidente.
I mean, Boris Johnson, Mary Boustert, once said that he wanted to be world king. Well, Donald Trump is doing a Boris Johnson impression here, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, I just think that, like the claim that he wanted to buy Greenland as a real estate deal, I found that, I got, all we're asking for is to get Greenland title and ownership. That's all he was asking for. And I think this is on the same sort of hugely hubristic and hugely bombastic, another play by Trump. The thing is, he's very good at getting all our attention.
Oh, yes.
He's taken all our attention.
I think every programme this week, we've done our first hour and sometimes the third hour as well on Donald Trump.
And what's amazing to me is that we've been so worried about Greenland. And I did start saying last week, I wish somebody on the news would say this idea that he's going to invade Greenland, it isn't going to happen. It's a nonsense. But I suppose you can't say that because there's always just a slight doubt that he might be that stupid. But isn't it amazing that that was all we were talking about till yesterday, and now suddenly everyone's talking about this Board of Peace? And I agree. I think this government does many good things, and I absolutely think Yvette Cooper's very assured statement this morning that we wouldn't be joining for now, and that we had absolutely clear concerns about having murderous dictator Putin invited to be on the board. Trump says he's on. We don't quite know that yet. We don't know what Russia is saying. We understand that Russia would pay the £1 billion for having their frozen assets in the USA released to pay to be on the board. Who knows? It's all, and this is the other thing which gets our attention. It's just his constant rumour, speculation, sleight of hand, and it absolutely puts Trump where he wants to be, which is in the centre of everybody's view.
Natalie Bennett.
Well, I think to ask the question of what's this Board of Peace about, I think it's quite telling that the logo actually looks very like the United Nations logo. And so this is an attempt to destroy any kind of sense of rule of law, international standards, and create Trump standards. And I'm going to agree with Steve and indeed with Mary about Yvette Cooper this morning, what this government said about the Board of Peace is absolutely right. But I'm afraid that what we've seen is this government. I mean, I heard about 2 weeks ago, Lord Coker, speaking for the government in the House, and I'm quoting exactly, the UK has a closer relationship with the US than we've ever had before. And I'm afraid the attempt we've seen from this government to cosy up to President Trump, to try and speak softly, if you do that to a bully, it invites more striking back. And I'm afraid I don't agree with Mary. I don't think we can in any way be confident that Trump will not take Greenland by force. Yes, he said one sentence in a long, rambling speech yesterday, but he might say something entirely different tomorrow. And we need to be realistic that we are now in a different international situation. I mean, the old Francis Fukuyama end of history 1990s thesis is very clearly dead. And we now need our government to be really realistic about the fact that we have to think about being a middle-ranking power as part of Europe, working with like-minded countries around the world to try and find a way through this mess.
So is that why the Green Party, is that why your leader said that we should think about leaving NATO and that we should ask Putin to give up his nuclear weapons and the USA should give up its military bases in the UK, which is probably one of the key things which gave Trump pause for thought? I mean, is that how the Green Party would exercise its middle power status?
Well, we are the party who's understood and made it clear and started to make it clear to the public that NATO, with the US as its centre, relying on the US, assuming that the US is a stable, secure power, that is something which has been increasingly obvious since the second Trump presidency came on the agenda, that is no longer realistic. We need to work with our neighbours. Exactly how you structure that, we've got to work out. I've been looking into the depths of this. The rules that created NATO were, of course, written in the 1950s. That is...
40s.
The treaties, a lot of the treaties...
NATO was formed in 1949.
But there's a lot of treaties that were written and it was all formalised in the 1950s. These are... And nothing's been updated since. This assumes an entirely different world.
So the fact that the UK government is now increasing its spending on defence the most since the Cold War, the fact that other NATO allies are moving from 2% towards 5%, we're not there yet. We've got to move towards that. The fact that we're recognising that the world order has changed. And Mark Carney did a very, very good speech at Davos about this. Is it Davos? Davos. Yesterday about that. I think.
I thought it was great.
I think it's just very, very simplistic to say we can't cozy up to Trump. You have to use all the powers in your arsenal, and certainly, I think the fact that Trump has backed away and in 3 rambling sentences said he wouldn't use force, that's partly to do with the fact that that Keir Starmer's used private channels of communication and stood very firmly with Europe, with Denmark, with Greenland for sovereignty.
Just before I go to Emily, the point there that Mary made about defence spending, if we buy into your thesis that everything's changed, and clearly everything is changing, do you accept that Britain needs to spend much more on defence?
Absolutely, but I think where I would disagree with Mary is that I think, and there was an excellent piece in the Financial Times, I think yesterday, on this, is that we have to be realistic about outputs, not about spending, but about what sort of bang we get for our pound, bang we get for our buck. And we also need to think about security in the round. And, we just had the government sneaked out something that was coming out from the Joint Intelligence Committee saying what a threat climate emergency and nature crisis present. We've slashed...
Well done for getting that in. But that's my cue to go to Emily, I'm afraid.
Let me finish this sentence, which is security has to be looked at in the round. I want to see more spending on defence, but we also need to not be slashing diplomacy spending, which we're doing, and aid spending.
Emily.
I think this Board of Peace isn't going to go very far because there's too many people joining it. I don't really know what they want to establish it. What does Trump want out of it? I suspect Trump largely wants to use this as a trade bartering talking shop, because if you have that many people joining it and that many people who don't agree with each other, it's not going to agree on anything. So it is going to be nothing more than another global talking shop.
Is that necessarily a bad thing, though?
I don't. I think it's just going to cause a lot of sort of setting up and more confusion. So yes, I think it's going to be a waste of time. I think we've got enough talking shops as it is. And I think it is just a sort of trade bartering thing that he's going to do. So I don't think we should join it, because I don't think we should say yes to something which I think is going to be a waste of everybody's time and will allow Trump to, as you say, sort of control it. And I do think what's interesting coming out of all this talk is that, as we say, we are talking about Trump and everything he does. And I think if you go back to the beginning of this week when he was holding a press conference in America, it was very clear when he was in the White House and talking to everybody, he knew very well the eyes of the world were on him. And it was done just as he was going to Davos, where the world's leaders were gathering. And I think he is, apart from ours, but we still had a big contingency of people there. And I think he's whatever you want to say about Trump, he is an absolute expert at getting everybody to focus on him. What I think is really interesting, and I was talking about this just before we came on, is what has been happening behind the scenes, because I think we should keep an eye on what is happening in Iran and Russia and Ukraine, because there will be people dying tonight in Iran and in Ukraine. And Witkoff and Jared Kushner went straight to Russia tonight. And there are rumours coming out of Davos that to some extent, this has been a distraction, and America is moving forces towards Iran. So I just think Trump is also very good at the art of the deal, very good at keeping the attention on him. And I think it does produce, you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. And I think we're all completely blind to what those conversations are going to be in Russia tonight, and completely blind as to what his next move over Iran will be. Is he going to cushion out and they're just going to quietly murder thousands more people, because it is like an unbelievably murderous state? Or is he going to... I suspect he is going to carry on cracking down on Iran. I think we can't ignore... Everyone likes to say, Trump this, Trump that, and get caught up in all the drama. He has done some good things. There is peace being discussed in Gaza. You say that. Do you think Gaza, the peace, the stopping the fighting right now would have happened without him? Do you think Iran would have that bunker bomb that went in, Hezbollah, Hamas? They are all much weaker. So either you're nodding at me saying that, yes, I agree, some of these terrible terrorist groups have now been
Emily's
brought to
talking
heel,
about Natalie, for those listening rather than watching.
therefore, we can agree that we don't think Trump is perfect, but we shouldn't say that everything he does is terrible.
Natalie, that is a good point, isn't it? Because Armenia and Azerbaijan, they have been at war ever since the end of the Cold War, sort of sporadically. And Trump did bring them together and got them talking, and it's ended. Venezuela, now you will tell me, it's broken international law. Tell that to 99.5% of Venezuelans who are absolutely thrilled that a brutal dictator is now out of their country.
One person or two people, a couple, have left Venezuela. The deputy has now taken over from exactly the same regime. But I think if we think about what Trump's trying to do, I don't know, and I don't think anyone really does know, and I'm not sure if Trump is consistent from one day to the next. But what we very often hear is the story that we want to entirely dominate the Western Hemisphere. Trump is very clearly very close to Putin to basically divide the world up into three spheres of influence: Russia, China, and America. And that means we cannot regard America as anything like a reliable ally.
Ian, I think
you never have done, have you?
No, it would appear that history is proving us right.
Steve? A Republican friend of mine said Trump's a comedian who should be taken seriously, but not literally, which is all very well, apart from consequences. Because I think here's the thing, he can get everything he practically needs through existing treaty law. I think it's the 1951 Defence of Greenland Agreement. And it sounds like, from his conversation with the NATO Secretary-General, former Netherlands Prime Minister Mark Rutte, that he's got the deal he wants. Well, that will be within existing treaty law. So we've had this enormous flurry of activity and all this posturing, all this very risky behaviour for what? In order to get what he already was entitled to. And here's where it could go wrong. I believe that Russia would love to take Svalbard. They've already got some settlements on Svalbard. Svalbard's the gateway to the northern Russian nuclear ports for their submarine fleet. They'd love to take Svalbard. But if all the time Trump's posturing that it's okay to take Greenland by force, despite it being an allied territory, what does that say to Putin? And this is the trouble, consequences. The reason it matters that we uphold certain values and rules and cultures is to avoid the consequences which come from sending these enormous signals that certain conduct is okay when actually it's very dangerous.
But can I just add, I'm sorry, Putin still went straight into Kiev. So I think we can talk as if our well-mannered behaviours and our sort of, Europe sort of constantly saying we got to hold up institutions and be really polite. There are bad actors in the world. There are plenty of people who do not care about international borders, as Putin proved. So
yes, but this is, of course, what lethal force is for.
We can talk about being nice, but the fact is there are also men.
But hang on, I'm not suggesting we be nice. I'm just saying even when you're being absolutely ruthless and absolutely focused and wielding power, there are still certain conventions and rules that one should follow in order to be predictable so that lethal mass mistakes aren't made.
And we shouldn't forget...
surely Donald Trump's biggest asset is his unpredictability.
Well, look, honestly, in the House of Commons, during the dramas I've led, sometimes I would choose to look a bit of a madman and unpredictable.
No.
Because it is quite a handy technique. The problem is, of course, when people start to genuinely think that you're an unpredictable madman, and then what happens then to your credibility?
And just in terms of giving licence, I'm very worried for the people of Taiwan.
Oh, yeah, well, that's another subject which people might like to pose a question on. It's 19 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
Big Mo
Cross Question with Iain Dale. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
21 minutes past 8 on Cross Question. Our next question is another WhatsApp question from Simon. With Canada saying in Davos that it will increase collaboration with China in order to protect itself from the USA, what should the UK do in this regard? Well, of course, the permission for the Chinese embassy has been granted this week. Keir Starmer is about to pay a visit to China. So I guess, what would you advise him to say, all of you, when he gets to China? Want to reset relations or what? Emily?
I think Canada has long been treading this path between the two, hasn't it? I mean, he only just visited China, Mark Carney. So I think he is quite smartly positioning himself between the two because it's a sort of bulwark against Trump sort of breathing down his neck, isn't it? I think for the UK, we have trod a sometimes maybe over-enthusiastic line with China, but I think we cannot deny that it is a huge trading partner with the world, including the UK. And I think we have to be incredibly careful to sort of tread that very careful line where we have to watch what China's doing in this country. There is absolutely no doubt. And our own intelligence service have said this. They've got more spies than any other country here in the UK. I'm worried at the news coming out of Cambridge that we've just done a deal with the Chinese, the university's just done a deal with the Chinese government. I have attended some meetings where there was a very big Chinese firm there, which Huawei, that then was removed from the country. And it was, God knows how many Cambridge groups were there who were being funded by Huawei. And these were deep research units. Liverpool University, for instance, has a sort of swap deal with a Chinese university. And, as we know, Liverpool does a lot of science work. And it's interesting that the deal is that our students go to their university after they finish university for a year. And clearly the Liverpool University has got some big financial bonus from this. But, we should be aware China is like spying on what we're doing the whole time.
Natalie.
Well, I start from the position I was co-chair until recently of the All-Party Parliamentary Group in Hong Kong. And when we go to China, can't avoid talking about Hong Kong, talking about the genocide. Independent inquiries have called it that against the Uyghurs, the long-term situation in Tibet. We need to be realistic, however. We also need to work with China on issues of the climate emergency. They are very, very significant players in that space and, in some respects, positive players in that space. So it's a case of not going in with all guns blazing, of enthusiasm, embrace, which we have seen some recent governments doing. We also need to just be realistic and say, well, we need to have relationships, we need to talk to you, but we also need to acknowledge all of those issues from the Uyghurs to Tibet to Hong Kong.
Steve?
Well, I think the question was, what should he say? And I would put it that there should be two aspects: humility, resolve. The humility is to say China's a great nation. It's one of the most powerful nations in the world, and we respect China, because that's, of course, what they want, is to be respected as a great power. So give it to them. It's just factually true, give it to them. But the resolve comes in that you say, but we cannot allow China to export massive market distortions where you subsidise, for example, steel production, and you wipe us out.
We've been saying that for years.
And therefore, we are going to, it's used trade defence. It's not protectionism when somebody else is subsidising the production of, say, steel. We are going to defend ourselves against your massive market distortions, and we're going to put tariffs on. So it's a combination of humility and resolve. We cannot allow you to put people out of work in the UK through state subsidy of massive industries.
I just point out the Chinese still own Scunthorpe Steelworks, by the way.
Well,
11 months into the government taking it over. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, well, many of us are all in favour of foreign direct investment, but, at what price? And this, again, we should be wise, not naive in what we do. And for people to own major industries is fine, as long as they're actually trying to operate them to make a profit through production. The other thing on espionage, I hope you won't mind me saying, on my Substack, voices.fightingforafreefuture.com, there is I get
alerts every day.
Brilliant. There is a free post just out, how to counter espionage in Parliament, because espionage will happen. What people forget is actually mostly very low grade. The Chinese suck up everything, what you have for breakfast, what pets you like, because they need to know how to approach you and cultivate you. And most espionage is very low level, because it always starts low level and then it escalates. So I've put out a 5-point plan for people in Parliament to counter espionage.
I should be reading it on my train home tonight, but only if you subscribe to my Substack.
I will do.
Mary.
Well, I'm going to subscribe to both Substacks.
This programme has already been worthwhile.
Clearly, yeah, absolutely. Another double the listening base. But yeah, I mean, it's clear, isn't it, that China rivals the US and will, within the next 30 years, rival the US as the major superpower, given its rate of growth and given that the US as a superpower, I think, is starting to show signs of decline. I think that explains quite a lot of Trump's behaviour. I think when great powers start to realise that their hegemony is being threatened, then they start to behave in ways which are clearly quite erratic. And I think that's what's happening with Trump. And I think that, by the way, the government that sold the Sheffield steel plant to China for £1 was the last Conservative government, without any guarantees about how that plant would be operated, and that's why it had to be rescued by a Labour government.
And I bet it was in order to save jobs, which of course would have been the criticism if they'd let it go. Look, I'm not going to pretend that any of these choices are easy. They're not. They're all hard, and they all require trade-offs, which is why I've tried to be quite careful not to be unnecessarily partisan. But I've certainly criticised my own party many times over a long period.
Yeah. Right, let's bring in another question before we go to the news at 8:30-ish. Evan in West Wales says, given Joe Biden's obvious cognitive deterioration towards the end of his term, and now Trump's increasingly erratic and destabilising behaviour, should there be an age limit imposed on heads of government in Western democracies, including here in the UK? Natalie.
What I would like to see is a great many more younger people involved in our politics. In fact, last night in the House, we were debating the proposed social media ban for under 16s, and there was no one in the House of the next generation. We were all the generation after that, or the great-grandparents. We have far too much balance towards older people, and we don't hear enough from 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds and 25-year-olds. You compare us to most continental European countries, they've got far more younger people involved in politics. What we need is the full age range across our parliament, across our politics, being heard.
But what about the question?
No, because as I was hearing that question and thinking of that, I was thinking of Lord Dubs, survivor of the Kinder transport, absolute star of the House of Lords, and he's 90-something. So people can be, let's not discriminate solely on age. Let's look at capability.
You're about to remove people from the House of Lords once they're 80, so...
well, you need to talk to the government about that.
Labour's brought that in, so...
Well, as somebody nowhere near 80, Mary, you obviously don't have a dog in this race.
No. I think that age limits are important. And actually, the House of Lords is completely different from this question. Is about heads of state and heads of government. And listen, we can't impose age limits on heads of government, but it's clearly the fact that if you're 80,
it's possible to do.
Yeah, we can't do that worldwide, can we? We could do that.
No, but we could in our own country.
Yeah, we could. I think being a head of government is such a weight, so physically and mentally demanding, so 20 hours out of every 24 engaged on this huge workload. And I think it does require people who are not in their 80s. And I do think it's a failure of the American system that all they could do until Kamala Harris took over in the last election was to put two 80-year-old white men against each other.
Steve?
There absolutely should not be age limits. People should be judged as individuals and they should be free to fully perform to the maximum extent. However, there is a case for being sensible and behaving, again, wisely. I mean, poor Joe Biden was obviously, as they say, indisposed. Everyone could see it. And I'm afraid large numbers of people discredited themselves by pretending that he was other than unfit to do the job by the end. And it's very sad. But when he was basically the leader of the Western world, he shouldn't have been left there, obviously in public, suffering.
And I don't think the American media have yet been held to account for their role in hiding this absolute scandal.
And it's one thing to wish to be kind to somebody who's suffering, but there does have to come a point where you have to say, I'm afraid you're no longer fit to do this dangerous job.
And Kamala Harris, actually, I think, has a huge responsibility here because she could see, the cabinet could see that, and they should have invoked the 25th Amendment, but they didn't have the balls to do so. Emily?
No, and I mean, on that point, I completely agree with you. I think the Democrats will suffer from that for a long time because the fact is they said that Biden was okay. And in fact, it meant that other people around him were running the country, not the man that had been voted in to run the country. I think that's sort of criminal. It's
like a pretense, right?
Yeah, but it's a lie.
Like Churchill in 1953.
Well, was that true?
Yeah, because he had had a stroke and the country was effectively being run by his son-in-law, Christopher Soames.
Well, also wrong. So
and there was no.
So maybe it's not about age. It's about proving your health checks. Although Biden kept putting out these health checks, didn't he, saying he was fine and he clearly wasn't. So I don't know. I don't like age. I don't like anyone being told they're either too young or too old to do anything. Just to take your point up about having young people in politics, House of Commons is full of young people. I'm standing as a local councillor at the moment alongside a 21-year-old. I mean, I think there's actually a really fantastic amount of young people employed in politics. But I think you need that breadth as well, because you need, I'm not going to say grey beard because that makes it sound like it's going to be a man, but that length of sort of viewpoint and that wisdom that I think you can collect through the ages, but you also need that wonderful sort of youthful sort of energy and purpose.
Well, and also, I mean, an 18-year-old is an expert on what it's like to be an 18-year-old in Britain today.
Yes.
And that's not
so's
like...
a 6-year-old. That's no argument.
No.
Well, no, but an 18-year-old is old enough to be there in Parliament and can talk about what the experience is like of the education system they've just been through, what it's been like, to be a teenager through COVID, all of those experiences that none of us have had.
The Greens would probably lower the voting age to 10, wouldn't you, if you were allowed? I mean...
well, 16 to start off with, and then we'll see.
I'm totally against 16.
Oh, so you're not ruling it out. Interesting. Right, we must move on. It's 8:32 on LBC News Headlines with Darryl Jackson.
Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukrainians are living like the film Groundhog Day, claiming nothing has changed since he last addressed Davos. He's also revealed the first trilateral talks between Ukraine, Russia and the US will take place tomorrow. It's understood the number of police forces in England and Wales is set to be cut drastically under major reforms expected to be announced by the Home Secretary early next week. It'll be the largest overhaul of policing in decades in an effort to tackle what government sources call an epidemic of everyday offences. And suspended Labour MP Andrew Gwyn's confirmed he'll stand down from Parliament on health grounds. There are rumours potential leadership challenger Andy Burnham will fight for the vacant Greater Manchester seat. LBC weather clearer in southern and central areas tonight, staying wet and windy further north, a low of 1 degree.
This is LBC.
At
Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:36. Let's just reintroduce our panel to you if you just tuned in. Emily Sheffield, political commentator and columnist for the London Standard, and aspirant councillor, we've just learned, which means that we won't be hearing much from her in the first 6 months of the year because we won't be allowed to have you on when the elections are on. Baroness Mary Boustard is a Labour peer. She doesn't need to be elected to anything. She's also former General Secretary of the National Education Union. Baroness Natalie Bennett, Green Party peer, former leader of the Greens. Do you miss the days of leader?
No, I certainly don't miss, looking out the door to see if there's any paparazzi outside the door before you go out. That's one of those things.
Had that?
Yes, so in the height of 2015, the last screen surge.
Right. And Steve Baker, former Conservative MP and Minister, and Substacker, as we've also learned. Now, as we heard in the news there from Darryl, government sources have said this evening that the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is expected to announce early next week that she plans to drastically reduce the number of police forces across England and Wales from the current number of 43. She believes too much money is being wasted on each of those forces having their own headquarters and administrative staff and so on. And she'd rather this money would be spent on fighting crime instead. It's not yet known how many police forces there would be if these reforms do go ahead, with an independent review set to be commissioned to decide the number of forces and also where they're based. Now, I remember back in the Blair government when Charles Clarke was Home Secretary, they put forward a similar plan to combine police forces and it came to grief. Let's have a brief discussion on this before we move to our next question. Mary, does that sound sensible?
It does. I just spent a year looking at the police, in particular the Police Federation of England and Wales, and was chair of a report which came out on the Federation in April this year. And the Federation runs with 8 regions. And we visited each of the regions, and they're not completely coterminous with the different forces, but it was clear when we went. So I spent about 9 months talking to police officers, talking to Federation members, talking to chief police officers, and talking to national stakeholders as well. It's quite clear that if you were going to start designing a police force in this country, you wouldn't start with 43 police forces. That's a historical consequence of previous decisions. And when you look at the pressures on the police, and this, we did a lot of interviewing police officers, and the need for greater numbers on the front line, greater protection and equipment for police officers, greater investment in technology to make their work much more doable. For example, the gathering and writing of evidence and the keeping of evidence, just taking hours and hours and hours and away from actually getting police officers on the beat and getting them interacting with the public, then it seems to me that it is entirely logical and sensible to have bigger forces where you can have economies of scale and where you can invest. You're shaking your head, but I spent a year with the police, and this was a view of many
of the
police
Evening
officers.
Standard. I dealt with the Met for a long time.
Well, I don't
I've
think
just
you
been
can
dealing
take
with the police right now. Sorry, you can shake your head and just say, "Oh, just because I've studied something, I don't have an opinion."
All right, let's agree. We can stop shaking our heads.
Right, let's stop shaking our heads.
I could. You can have an opinion on something just because I haven't studied it for a year. I mean, I have spent a lot of time looking at the Met and dealing with the Met in London and meeting the heads of the Met, and I don't think just saying, "Oh, we're going to may not be a bad idea to reduce the 43 forces, but one of the reasons the police are not working in many areas is that the systems that we have set up currently are not working themselves. And this is like technology that's not speaking to each other. This is things like
That's like the same in the health service.
Exactly. It's just a lot of to take a sort of example I've just dealt with recently. There was a social housing flat that had been taken over by drug dealers in Bayswater, and residents were being threatened by these people, and they were dialing it through to 101 endlessly. 101 was reporting it. Police would occasionally turn up. Nothing would happen. No one would get back to the people who were reporting it. I met with the local community officers. 101 had never, ever passed down those reports to the local community officers. None of those reports had been passed to the social housing companies that ran the flat for 2 years. I saw with my own eyes this flat totally taken over. It took me 3 weeks to just knock everyone's heads together. 2 people got arrested. The flat is being closed down. It was about systems not talking to each other. And in Bayswater is run by Charing Cross.
Okay.
So you're saying we're going to make these police stations these police forces even larger, big systems. I promise you the technology will be an absolute disaster and it won't work.
For, say, Norfolk and Suffolk to combine, or Kent and East and West Sussex to combine. You've got economies of scale there, surely, Steve.
Yeah, so we have to ask, why have we got so much fragmentation? And I believe, searching my memory, because I didn't expect this news, that it's partly because when Peel nationalised policing, the centre ground of British politics was classical liberal to libertarian, and people feared persecution by the state. And so we had fragmented and multiple police forces in order to avoid tyranny and oppression by the state. Now, of course, the context today is vastly different. Although people's sense of crime isn't this. Actually, numerically, serious violent crime has collapsed over the years, and burglary, partly because criminals have moved over to fraud. Fraud doesn't happen on the regional basis of the police forces we have. It's quite often perpetrated from overseas. I actually won the argument advanced by Rusi that our intelligence community should be used to target overseas fraudsters perpetrating fraud in the UK. Fraud's absolutely endemic, and it can't be dealt with by Thames Valley Police, say, on a regional basis. So there is a case for some centralisation, but I would be very wary of it. I partly would say that police and fire, for example, is quite a small part of your overall council tax bill. Policing's not that expensive as a basic public service. But also, talking about our experiences, when I watched policing during my 14 years in Parliament, first thing I thought that police officers actually did an outstanding job, but that they were being dramatically let down by the system. One of the many criticisms one could level at my party is we introduced police and crime commissioners thinking that would change policing priorities. But of course the police serve the law. We should have been repealing laws, and we should have been insisting that laws are upheld. So, for example, drugs laws. It's very interesting that the police insisted that they had to uphold the law in relation to social media posts. There's absolutely no question the police don't uphold the law on drugs, because you can walk through. I walked through a park and it stank of cannabis, and there were police officers in the park and they do nothing. And we've ended up in a position where we have laws which are simply not upheld. And by the way, far, far too much police time is spent looking after people with mental health issues, because there's not enough care for people. And I'm not talking, this is not like mental health on the boundaries of whether people need care. This is people who need to be in hospital right now because of their level of distress and threat to their own life.
40% of police time is now spent on dealing with people with mental health
That was
issues. Something like
totally unacceptable.
Let me just say the Police Federation have tonight said that it welcomes there being some kind of major reform to policing, but they've warned that fewer forces doesn't guarantee more or better policing for communities, and changes must be driven by evidence and best practice, not lowest cost. Natalie.
I broadly agree with the Police Federation, but I would add that democracy and policing by consent are enormously important. That's the foundation of our policing. It's why our policing doesn't look like America's hideous policing, dangerous policing. And I very much agree with Emily in terms of the Metropolitan Police, with the such recognised embedded problems of racism and misogyny, etc. The further you take forces away from their local communities, from local democratic oversight. Now, police and crime commissioners were a disaster. The Green Party always said police and crime commissioners were going to be a disaster. But we want to see local councils, local authorities having a voice. And what we've got is a government that's just centralising power in fewer and fewer hands. Yeah. The so-called English devolution bill is the absolute opposite. It's concentrating power even more in Westminster. Councils are being made to be agents of the state of Westminster. They're not being able to make decisions locally. And this is another potentially enormously centralising move that takes people away from that local oversight, that local control, that democracy.
It's just the technology probably often it comes down to technology and it not working and people not knowing how to work it.
And the thing is, I very much agree with Steve that fraud is an enormous problem, and the City of London and our entire financial sector, 40% of the world's dirty money goes through the City of London and Crown dependencies. That's quoting a minister from the last Tory government. So we have a huge problem there, and that you need to work cooperatively. Right. We need to use technology. But local policing on the ground, you need that democratic
Brian
oversight.
says up here in Scotland we have one police force, one fire service and one ambulance service. Simples, think of the savings from all the management of each police force. Yet you also have a population of 5 million people.
Yeah. Less than
so, I mean, I think you have to bear that in mind. Right, we have lots more questions to come. So little time, it's 8:46.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
Donald Trump's Board of Peace, a motley collection of world leaders who've signed up, but an awful lot of Europeans are staying away, including Britain. What does this body represent? Is it a threat to the United Nations?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
Octopus.
Ask Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Short answers. 8:49. You just heard me say short answers to our panel because we've got so many questions, only 11 minutes left. Barry in Petersfield says, do you have any sympathy for these local councils who say they're just not able to hold elections in May? Now, just by way of background to this, 29 local councils across England have been granted permission to delay the elections they were due to hold this May, with those local authorities saying the demands of the government's major reforms to local councils mean they simply cannot cope with also organising elections at the same time. Gerald Ford comes to mind here. Some of you will know what the analogy is there. Most of these 29 councils, which have asked for a delay, are currently run by Labour. But 3 are run by the Conservatives and 1 by the Liberal Democrats. Well, Aggie told us there were 2 by the Liberal Democrats. But anyway, that's the rough figures there. Emily, seeing as you're standing in a local council election.
Well, London's obviously not going to be affected by this because actually, as I understand it, London is the model that the rest of the country is going to move to. So you're not going to have 2 sets of councillors like working one street. I have to say, I think there is some sense in this, if we step back from the politics of it, is that we're talking about councils. These particular councils are going to be abolished in 2 years. Yes. So you're holding elections that are going to last like 1 or 2 years at the most. And yes, they probably, knowing how busy councillors are, and they do, a lot of them do an incredibly good job, they should probably just be focusing on making those changes and carrying on working for their local communities. But as we know, Labour is tanking in the polls. I mean, tanking, let's be clear. The polls I've seen recently, the Greens are now ahead of them. Labour are literally at the bottom of the pile. And of course, there's some politics in this, because there's a lot of councillors who are very likely going to lose their seats in May. And I suspect they'd just like to carry out, they don't want to lose. And politically, it'll look absolutely terrible for Keir Starmer.
Well, Barry asked about sympathy for councils and councillors, and yes, I have sympathy for them. Budgets are enormously stretched. They are having an entire reorganisation imposed on them from Westminster, in which they've had no say at all. So that sympathy with the councillors. I have no sympathy at all with the Labour government, which is allowing this to happen, to deny
for the second year.
And some people will be councillors elected for a 4-year term, serving very likely for 7 years. And, picking up the point that Emily made, I mean, I raised this in the House. Just this week, we had a Derbyshire County Council election in which we, the Greens, took the seat off Reform. We got 43% of the vote. Reform got 35% of the vote. Conservatives, 14%. And Labour, 4%. And then you look at that list of how many Labour councillors who are going to be sitting there when the political views in their communities have changed.
Mary, this is a constitutional outrage, isn't it, to abolish elections? If Donald Trump was doing this, you'd be the first to criticise him.
But it's not a Labour government that's abolishing elections. It's reorganising local councils. So you have unitary councils, which can then provide much better services, quicker decisions around housing and planning, and the spending vast amounts of money holding elections when they're going to have to do re-elections when the reorganisation has taken place. I just think is a waste of time and money. So I think
what price democracy, eh?
Well, democracy. I mean, this has been done before.
Not for two consecutive years, it hasn't.
No, but it has been done before. I think it's unfortunate it's done for 2 consecutive years.
Well, it was done by Robert Jenrick before.
Yeah, that's right. So, yes.
Steve?
So my sympathy, yes and no. No, because it's vastly too politically convenient and everyone can see it. But yes, because when Buckinghamshire abolished 4 district councils and the county council in order to move to a unitary, we postponed the elections and no one really cared. And I don't think it meant that council services collapsed or people were really denied their vote. The big problem with democracy and local government is that people don't turn out to vote. In fact, turnout's very, very low. I mean, a council by-election, you'd be, from memory, 25% would be good.
You're lucky.
Yeah. So, people don't turn out to vote at the council, and it does matter because council services really matter when it turns out your parents need social care or whatever it may be.
Right. A text question from Rich in Stockport, which if it were after 9 o'clock, I might reword this question. Is Keir Starmer better off having Andy Burnham inside the tent or kept outside of it? Very diplomatically put, Rich. Steve?
Well, I like Andy Burnham. I don't agree with him, I'm sure. He's Labour after all, but he's a civilised guy, and I'd rather have him in Parliament than Andrew Gwynn, bearing in mind that Andrew Gwynn has had to go over the messages that he sent and their content. But yeah, Keir Starmer probably is better bringing him into Parliament and probably would be better putting him in the Cabinet and giving him a brief that was very, very difficult. I mean, that's the way that politics goes. And that's what I'd do if I was Keir Starmer. But all the time he's the king over the water that people are yearning for, Keir Starmer's got a problem. The reality, though, is whoever leads the Labour Party will face the same problem of too many Labour MPs who won't vote for the things which Labour ministers know needs to be done. Welfare reform being the obvious one where there was a big rebellion. And so, in a sense, it doesn't matter who the leader is. It's going to be, I would rephrase it differently, it's going to be a big problem for whoever is the leader.
Mary?
Well, I think that Andy Burnham's doing a great job in Manchester. I'm a Bolton girl. And
he should stay there.
I know him a bit, and he's very popular in Manchester. And I mean, when you get Jeremy Clarkson writing in the Times about what a brilliant place Manchester is and how the Manchester economy is booming and what a great social life there is at night, and the city seems to be working really well. A huge amount of that is down to Andy Burnham, who understands the North and has been a great mayor of Manchester. Now, if he wants to give that up and to become a Labour MP and come back to Parliament, and that's his decision. We can't predict that.
What
and
would
he
you
said
urge
tonight,
him to do?
What would I urge him to do? It's not my place to urge him to do.
No, come on. You're a Labour Party member. You're in the House of Lords. You've got an opinion.
It's not, well, I don't really have an opinion about whether Andy Burnham should be an MP or not. Okay, all right then. I think he makes a great mayor of Manchester. And I like Manchester.
Natalie.
I make it a general policy of, I'm not an expert on the internal operations of the Labour Party. I'm afraid we hear a great deal about it and there seems to be a great deal of turmoil. What I'm focused on as a Green is, we know we're going to...
No, we know what you're focused on. That's not the question. The question is, do you think Keir Starmer is better off having Andy Burnham inside the tent or outside it?
Well, I think whichever way it happens, that we're going to continue to be disappointed in the Labour government. And what we're aiming as Greens is to replace Labour, not to continue to be disappointed by them.
OK, Emily?
Well, just to pick up on the Green point, I think to move this on a bit is that if he does run in this seat, there is a chance he might not win.
Yeah.
I mean,
because
your leader may stand against him, Zach Polanski, in that seat. And I would say there might be a chance that Zach could win. I think it's a pretty slim one. I really like Andy. I got him to be I'm a Conservative. I got him to be write a column for me when I was editor of the Evening Standard. I think he does make a very good mayor.
What on earth would you do that?
Oh, I think I was winding Steve up. I think it was in that era, wasn't it? We wanted to bring the cities together. We were levelling up, and I wanted to talk. I wanted someone else from a great city in this country to talk to swap notes with Londoners.
He'd
done it.
Oh, sorry, Corey told me I hadn't gone to Steve. I have.
Corey,
for once in his life, Corey got it wrong. Right, let's go to our fun question. Jennifer in Leeds. Taylor Swift has become the youngest woman ever inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in America. But what secret skill do you have which you think might be half of
Hall of Fame?
Which might be Hall of Fame worthy? Natalie.
Well, I'm not sure I still have it now with the state of my eyesight, but it was, I did play for the Times cricket team against the Daily Mail cricket team, and I did hook a guy known as Swifty for 4. So, a mean hook shot.
And how many did you get?
I saved the game, but I didn't score quite enough runs to win it. I can't remember. It was 40 or 50.
Emily?
Okay, so Hall of Fame, I don't think I can boast of anything that makes me Hall of Fame worthy, really sorry, but I did try to get into the Guinness Book of Records when I was young for trying to eat more fish fingers than anyone else ever had. I think I did get to 33. And then I felt quite sick.
You've now given me a thought.
I love fish fingers.
I did not predict that.
I once ate 36 mince pies. I am now a type 2 diabetic, ladies and gentlemen. Steve
Don't
Baker.
try this at home, I think we should say.
I, as a minister, visited an institution whose main purpose was the security of computer systems, and I'm a former software engineer. I promised I wouldn't name the institution, so I'm not going to. I sat down at one of their computer terminals and gave myself super user access to their secure systems. Leapt up, rejoicing, shouting, "I am root." The room divided into 2 groups of people. The people who knew what that meant, that I'd broken the security on the secure IT systems, and the people who had no idea what I was talking about. So my secret skill is I hacked the secure systems at the centre the place where they do lots of secure stuff.
And the leader of your party hacked Harriet Harman. I mean, what's not to like?
I should say I wasn't breaking the law because it was arranged for the purpose
for us
of.
To judge.
Yeah, no, it was arranged for the purpose of testing security
Mary.
stuff.
So I've really wrapped my brains. I make from scratch Japanese gyozas.
Japanese what?
Dumplings. Those gyoza dumplings.
Your house for dinner.
When I've got time to myself a day. It was something I did with my daughter when she was 17 and difficult, and she liked doing that. It's something we did together, so I'm quite good at that.
I still have no clue what you're talking about, but
Japanese gyoza, it's those little
I can't do
dumplings.
Japanese food.
Oh, it's fantastic.
No, sorry. Draw a line at that. I'm sure it's very nice, but I can't be doing it. Right, thank you very much indeed for coming on the panel tonight. Monday's panel includes the Conservative MP and former Deputy Foreign Secretary, Sir Andrew Mitchell, the journalist and Labour Party campaigner Paul Mason, plus the journalist and podcaster Andrew Gold. They will be with me on Monday from 8. Now, what are we talking about in the next hour? I forgot. Oh, we're talking about toilet training. And a sentence I never thought I would utter on LBC. Because, believe it or not, 1 in 4 5-year-olds in England and Wales start school without being toilet trained. Now, I mean, I'm not a parent myself, but I would have thought one of the key things for any parent to do would be train your child to use the toilet, or at least not have to wear nappies by the time they're 5 years old. I mean, is that so difficult? Why do you leave it to teachers? It's outrageous, isn't it? 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, it's understood the Home Secretary is planning to dramatically reduce the number of police forces in England and Wales. There are currently 43. Ministers think it'll free up cash by reducing back office functions, but it will be well after the next election before we see any benefits. Baroness Mary Bowstead, a Labour peer who spent a year looking at the Police Federation, told LBC it's clear that reducing the number of forces could be a benefit.
When you look at the pressures on the police, and we did a lot of interviewing police officers, and the need for greater numbers on the front line, greater protection and equipment for police officers, greater investment in technology to make their work much more doable, then it seems to me that it is entirely logical and sensible to have bigger forces.
The first talks between Ukraine, Russia and the US aimed at ending the war in Ukraine will take place tomorrow. Officials from all 3 countries will meet in the UAE following Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky's meeting in Switzerland. The UK says it will look at other ways it can support the peace process in Gaza after refusing to sign up to Donald Trump's Board of Peace. The government is concerned about Russia's possible involvement. The UK's independent reviewer of terrorism legislation has told LBC that the government delay on a social media ban for under-16s is regrettable. The House of Lords voted in favour of banning under-16s from social media last night. It will now go to the Commons for MPs to discuss, but there'll be a 3-month consultation before there are any changes. Speaking to LBC, Jonathan Hall KC says he's told the government not to delay on the issue.
It's impossible to regulate content online at the level that you'd need to do to keep children safe. Either you'd have to have individuals reading every single post. If you think about the billions and trillions of posts, it's just impossible. Yeah. Or you have to have some machine, some algorithm, and that will make catastrophic mistakes. Either it will cut down everything so we can't have a normal chat on WhatsApp or whatever, or it won't work at all.
And a by-election in Greater Manchester could pave the way for Andy Burnham's return to Westminster. Independent MP Andrew Gwynn is standing down due to medical reasons. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 11 points at 10,150. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.14. LBC weather, clearer skies for a time in southern and central areas tonight. More rain moving into the southwest overnight and staying wet and windy further north, a low of 1 degree. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 4 minutes past 9 on LBC. Now, there are some days when, just to tell you how we construct this programme, about 2 o'clock, Chris and Corey send me a list of subjects that they think I might like to talk about on the show. And then I often reject all of them and say, no, I don't want to do any of those. Let's think of something else. Well, today on the list was this story about the fact that 1 in 4 children who started reception classes in 2025 were not toilet trained. Now, I don't know about you, but I was rather shocked by that. Because have we really got to a point where parents don't seem to have a clue what the word parent actually means. And I know people get very aggravated sometimes when I start talking about parenting, not being a parent myself. But it makes me very, very angry that people in this country have children. They don't teach them how to brush their teeth and therefore expect their primary school teachers to do it for them. They don't teach their children toilet training skills and expect, therefore, that teachers and teaching assistants in primary schools should have to cope with that. That is not what they are there for. They are there to teach. Parents are there to parent. And I might sound like a patronising old git, but I frankly do not care, because I think it is outrageous that teachers and teaching assistants have to be subjected to this kind of thing. So this was a survey of teachers, and it's prompted warnings that growing numbers of pupils are struggling with basic life skills. Well, yeah, absolutely. And whose responsibility is it to teach them those life skills? Well, it's not the government's. It's not the teachers. The teachers are there to teach children how to read, write, learn, etc., not how to use the toilet. That is a basic job of a parent, is it not? I know I'm sounding really preachy. Don't care. I intend to be, because any one of you that is listening to this programme now who is a parent who hasn't taught their child to use the toilet by the age of 5, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, because it is not down to your child's teacher to have to do that. I mean, what part of this am I missing here? 0345 6060 973. Now, in an annual survey of primary school staff in England by the early years charity Kindred Squared, teachers estimated that 26% of the children in their reception class were having frequent toilet mishaps, rising to more than 1 in 3 in the North East. The survey also found that 28% of children were unable to eat and drink independently. What? And 25% were struggling with other basic life skills. And that figure doesn't account for the proportion of children whose delays may be related to disabilities or special educational needs. Now, Kindred Squared said increasing numbers of children were arriving at the school gate without the basic life skills needed to engage with the curriculum. Staff also reported that 28% of pupils were not able to use books correctly. I mean, ye gods, what kind of country are we becoming? For example, they were trying to swipe or tap pages like a phone or tablet. I mean, the mind boggles, doesn't it? These findings come as the government seeks to increase the proportion of children starting reception school ready, having met certain developmental milestones, such as basic language skills, being able to eat, go to the toilet and dress themselves independently, and the ability to sit, play and listen. However, Kindred Squared's survey of 1,000 primary staff found they estimated more than 1 in 3, 37% of children, were starting reception not school ready, and that's up from 33% in 2024. The sharpest declines in school readiness were reported by teachers in the North East, West Midlands and North West. Staff estimated they were spending 1.4 hours a day changing nappies. Nearly 1.5 hours a day, 90 minutes changing nappies. I mean, here's a radical suggestion for you. I think there is a case to be made for schools to have a rule that said, if your child cannot use the toilet properly, we are rejecting your child. And that might be an incentive for parents to actually do their job as parents. 0345 6060 973. KG says in Spain, your child has to be trained by 3 or 3.5 when they start full-time infants. If they have an accident, then parents have to go to the school to change them. The assistant and teachers won't do it. This needs to be implemented in the UK. It would get so-called parents doing what they're meant to. Although I feel the lazy parents would blame their child because they had an accident at school. Well, let's talk to Liat Hughes Joshi, who is a journalist and author who writes about parenting and family life. Liat, welcome to the programme. I'm suspecting you might be about to have a go at me, but feel free. My shoulders are broad. I mean, are you as shocked by these statistics as I am?
I'm only not shocked because I've seen this for the last few years. It's getting worse, but it's been going on for a while. We've been talking about this in the sort of parenting world, certainly since before the pandemic, but it definitely exacerbated then. I am not blaming the pandemic, and I'm not going to let any parents off the hook for that, because I think that happens all too often with things. There is no excuse for this. So I am on the same side of you as you, Iain, about it. It is parents' responsibility. It is not teachers' responsibility to instill life skills such as using toilets, being able to eat, being able to use a book as a book, and not being mistaken and thinking it's an iPad. I just think that this stuff, these life skills, they're not easy to introduce to a child. You have to put quite a lot of effort into potty training in particular. It's pretty grim, if I'm honest. But it is part of being a parent. It is your responsibility to do it. And from the age of 2, 2.5, 3, every parent should be doing so. Of course, there are a small number of children who have genuine special needs who will struggle with this. And I have every sympathy for those parents. And I think that, support should be in place in those scenarios. But for everyone else, you need to take responsibility and make sure that on the first day of reception, your child has the full set of skills in place. Now, obviously, even then, very occasionally, a child is going to have an accident. It's always been the case. Yeah. But that's very different to it happening regularly. And the other thing I'd say about this, it's not just a time suck that affects teachers. It affects the other 74% of children whose parents have got them ready for school. Because those teachers would be teaching the whole class, giving the whole class attention. But actually, instead, they're being sucked away for, as you said, over an hour a day to deal with toilet accidents, children who can't change for PE without a lot of support rather than a tiny bit of help, children who can't manage to put the coat on for playtime. It's not fair on all the other kids.
I mean, how can that even be? And the fact that teachers, I remember talking about this a couple of years ago when some study came out that, in fact, I think the Department of Education were recommending that teachers in primary schools taught their pupils how to brush their teeth. Now, I mean, since when was that part of a teacher's job?
Yeah, it's not, and it shouldn't be. One thing that I'd suggest about all of this, it's not going to solve it, but I would like to see a system where every single parent is emailed 6 months before their child's first day at school, 3 months before, a month before, and a week before. They would get an email that provides checklists of what their child should be doing by day one and advice and guidance on how to make it happen. At the moment, there is lots of advice out there, including from the NHS and from other sort of organisations, but it requires parents to go and find that advice. I would like this to be sent out automatically by schools. They're going to be communicating with parents anyway, so presumably there wouldn't be a big data protection issue. If you've got a child who has special needs and you'd find that list inappropriate, you could opt out if they had genuine special needs. And I just think that it would make a little bit of difference, bit of a nudge towards making sure that parents are aware of expectations. And that would also hopefully give teachers a little bit more confidence to sort of push back with those parents in the first weeks where they haven't done their job properly. I mean, we did tell you for months that you should be doing this.
There are various children's charities. Andrea Leadsom, former Tory cabinet minister, she set up a charity called I think it's 1001 Days, giving children the best start in life in the first, effectively 3 years of their life, I suppose. So they do valuable work on this, I'm sure. But do you think that the effective diminution of Sure Start centres has had an effect here, where a lot of parents from poorer backgrounds, I think, actually did benefit from Sure Start centres, and they maybe did learn a lot of the art of parenting from attending those centres? And I'm not saying they've all disappeared, but those sort of facilities are no longer available because of public spending cuts.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think it was a mistake to cut funding for Sure Start. I believe the government is now putting around £12 million into a similar scheme, Best Start hubs. So let's see how that pans out. Fingers crossed that it starts to fill some of these gaps. But again, you can't force people to attend those kind of centres.
Do you think there is any merit in giving schools the power to say, well, we're not going to accept your child if it isn't toilet trained?
I don't think it would be a popular opinion with parents in this cohort, but
probably would be with teachers.
I think they should have the option to do it. I think you'd have to be quite brave as a teacher to do that. And I think they would worry that they would be excluding some of the most vulnerable children in society. That's the problem. Is it better to have them in the system and help them? I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because there's probably a very small number of parents who can't do this stuff. They can't make it happen. And they're the ones that need real support and a bit of sympathy. And then there's another layer, another chunk who could be given a bit of a kick up the proverbial by this threat of saying, we'll send your child home.
Liat, thank you very much indeed. That's Liat Hughes-Joshi there, journalist and author who writes about parenting and family life. Well, there's all sorts of different angles to this, isn't there? I'd really like to hear from primary school teachers, particularly those of you that take reception classes. But is this something that doesn't just affect reception classes, that it continues for several years after the child starts school? And if you are a teacher or a teaching assistant, and I suspect that it's the teaching assistants who cop for this more than the fully qualified teachers, how long are you spending doing this? And do you talk to the parents about it? What do the parents say when you broach the subject? Because I suspect some of them will say, well, you're there. It's your job to deal with them. I'm leaving my children in your care, so it's your job to cater for their every need. That's not what you go into teaching for, is it? 0345 6060 973. It's 17 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.
The following
Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
19 minutes past 9 on LBC. Never in a million years did I think that I would be discussing potty training on LBC. But that is exactly what we're doing tonight, because I am really shocked by this survey that shows that 1 in 4 children who start reception classes in schools at the age of, 4 or 5 years old, they're not potty trained. And teachers and teaching assistants, on average, are spending 90 minutes every day changing nappies. I mean, I don't understand. If you're not outraged by that, why not? Surely it indicates a gross negligence on the part of the parent. I mean, you could almost call it tantamount to child abuse, I suppose, if you wanted to really go over the top. I think it is an outrage that parents just don't seem to understand the basics of parenting. And it's all very well to say, it's quite difficult to do, potty train a child. What do you think parents have been doing for the last several thousand years? My mother would have been horrified had she sent me to school and my sisters to school not being potty trained. In fact, she probably wouldn't have sent us. But we have a generation of parents who seem to not understand what the basics of parenting are all about. Why is this happening? Is it because they're not having those skills handed down from their own parents? Is it because the sort of family units are very different to what they used to be? Well, grandparents always used to be a part of a young child's life, and they would be able to hand down life skills. Whereas we live in much more fragmented communities now, where grandparents often live in different parts of the country. Whereas 100 years ago, they would have lived in the same village and been an integral part of the child's upbringing. I don't know. Is that something to do with it? Let's take this text from Daniel. Iain, I'm so glad you're covering this story. I'm a primary school teacher. I work in year 6, so children are aged 10 and 11. It's madness. I take the children on a 5-day residential, and there are children who can't even put their own socks on, fasten a coat, or tie their shoelaces. I will admit that I still, at the age of 63, have a problem tying my shoelaces. I will admit that. He continues, parents message us asking them to speak to their children about their behaviour at home and get them to try and get their children to behave at home. We are free childcare. That's all we are now. What a depressing message that is. Mark is in Congleton. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for taking my call. It's good to talk to you. That story about children not being able to dress themselves properly is all too common in primary schools. My wife was a primary school teacher until very recently, and she reported that children would turn up not even able to, as you say, put a coat on or a jumper or that kind of thing, but also didn't know which way to hold a book, could barely speak because they'd never been taught to speak by their parents, presumably. They were content to put them in front of TV or screens or stuff. But I mean, the problem of potty training, as you call it, is a real problem. Now, I mean, I admit, kids of that age, 4 or 5, they will have accidents, won't they? Anybody can do that. I'm 58 and even I could do it, I guess. But, to be serious, there are a lot of kids who turn up at school in her experience as well, who aren't potty trained. And you're right, it's disruptive for the entire class. Even if a couple of kids in there are unable to look after themselves on an almost constant basis, it just disrupts the class. So again, without wishing to sound too I don't know what you'd say, hard line about this, I would say if a child is a repeat offender, it's as your previous caller, I think, was it Leah? She said it's
Leah, yeah.
Fault, is it? It's the parents' fault. So it's the parents who should feel the pain and the embarrassment, if that's what we want to call it as well. So why not? If a child is repeatedly soils themselves while they're in class and the parents are expecting the teachers to clear up after them as some sort of glorified childminder, why not tell the parent that they've got to start coming into school, spending all day with their child as their own individual childminder, while they get on with the rest of the class, so that the child will be less of a disruptive effect in the school.
Well, we could also adopt the Spanish system, I suppose, and say, well, if your child has an accident, you've got to come in and deal with it.
Yes, well, quite. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to, I don't know if the words exclude or, take a child out of school until they're potty trained. I think that just makes it worse for them. Potentially, that could do even more damage to the child's prospects in their future. And as I say, It's not the child's fault, is it? Let's face it. So, put the onus on the parent. The parent comes into class, spends all day with the child, takes it to the toilet when it needs to go, brings it back, and so on and so forth until it's toilet trained. And if they can't do it themselves for work purposes or whatever, but, as long as there's not a really good, medical reason for being unable to do it, they have to pay somebody else to get it. And I just think it's good for the child, good for the school that somebody else takes on the responsibility.
Let me read out this text, see what you make of it.
Okay.
This says, coming at this from another angle, as a father of two in a relationship and household where both parents have to work full time to make ends meet, do you think that this situation is becoming a symptom of that, i.e. the fact that because both parents have to work because of the costs of just living today, therefore they're not spending as much time with their children as parents in my generation would have done, because invariably the mother would have been at home the whole time?
Well, I mean, it's. I suppose in some cases that would be a reasonable defence. But I would say that's probably the minority of cases. That case where both parents are out to work to pay for things like housing, which, as we know, particularly in some parts of the country, is extremely expensive. I've got a lot of sympathy for that kind of thing. But that's my experience and my wife's experience. She was a primary school teacher. They're not millionaires. They don't get paid hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. I earned a little bit more than she did, but neither of us were bringing in wages which would even put us in the higher rate of tax. But we managed. We got two children. They went to primary school, toilet trained. They knew which way to hold a book. They could speak. They were eloquent. And I would say it's not that difficult. You just have to communicate with your child. You have to work with them and cooperate with them and encourage them and nurture them. And if you don't do that, it's no surprise they get to school unable to.
But it seems that the same children lack basic communication skills as well. I mean, you just wonder how the parents ever communicate with them.
Well, maybe that's the problem. Maybe, I would say, and I have to say, to contradict really the text that you've just read out, I've got lots of sympathy for their situation and that family's situation, but only because that's our situation as well. But, we are not PhD graduates. We are not massively paid. We live in very modest accommodation, but we still managed through nurture and communication with the children to bring them up in a way that when we sent them to school, we knew we could trust them. Not to have more than maybe the odd accident every now and then. And I really don't see how that's difficult, even with two parents working.
Mark, thank you very much. Rich says, I used to work in a nursery. One child I looked after, 3 years old, was in nursery almost 12 hours a day. Both parents very career-oriented. They turned up one Monday morning with a big bag of clothes saying, we're starting potty training. I asked how it had gone over the weekend, and they said, oh no, we're starting today. So at the end of the day, the bag of clothes was full again, of dirty clothes. By the Friday, the child was almost dry. This was about 10 years ago. It's not always the parents you think that don't potty train their children. When we spoke with school, the only things they were worried about was that the little ones could do the basics, dress themselves, potty training, etc. Let's read this next one. This is from Suki. Hi, Iain. Brackets, still my favourite presenter. Well, that's very nice to hear. Thank you very much, Suki. It's stiff competition at the moment. I don't have kids myself, but have nephews aged 5 and 3. The 3-year-old still has the odd accident at nursery, but yes, age 5, they should have been trained, as my older nephew is. It is more of a parental responsibility. It can't be nice for teachers. I love my nephews and happy to change their toilet mishaps, but if I was a teacher, I'm not sure I'd want to do it for other kids. I suppose there will be the odd exception, like an overly shy or neurodivergent child, but that is an exception. Reasons shouldn't be lazy parenting and an attitude of the school can do it. This applies to all areas, dressing themselves, eating, etc. Well, again, complete common sense there from you. I think most people listening to this programme would agree with that. Claire says, yes, yes, yes. Sounds like Meg Ryan. Not toilet trained equals no school. But Labour would never push that. Instead, they want to pay for the nappies with the removal of the 2-child cap, enabling parents to keep affording nappies. If nappies had to be washed, like when I was a child, remember that smell? That would get them toilet trained, but disposable nappies makes it too easy. So does this mean that all primary schools have to pay for their own supply of nappies and presumably parents don't have to take them in? I mean, again, utterly preposterous. So basically, our taxes are paying to subsidise the parents who cannot or will not potty train their children. Anyway, Claire continues. Also, mums were at home with their children instead of at work. It's no surprising that so many children are trying to tap or swipe. Just observe those in a supermarket trolley or pushchair. All seem to be looking at a phone or a tablet, no doubt to keep them quiet. I completely accept there will be times when parents do want to do exactly that, keep their children quiet and give them a screen to keep them occupied. I do understand that. But not all the time. We'll come to more of your calls and texts in just a moment, 0345 6060 973. So why is this happening so much and what can be done so fewer children are starting school in this situation? Is sort of national parenting classes a good idea? Or do you think the very people that would need to attend them are the ones that wouldn't? And the ones that would attend them would be the ones that are actually doing a pretty good job anyway. I don't know what the answer is here, but I do know that the answer lies in better parenting, if that makes sense. 9:31 on LBC. Daryl Jackson has the news headlines.
It's understood the government is to radically reduce the number of police forces in England and Wales. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood's expected to announce police reform next week and significantly cut the number of forces from its current level of 43. The Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin's started his meeting with Donald Trump envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to discuss a plan to end the war in Ukraine. The pair flew from Davos to Moscow earlier after the US president met Volodymyr Zelensky. And Andrew Gwynn has announced he's standing down as an MP, paving the possible return to Westminster for Andy Burnham. The independent member for Gorton and Denton was sacked as Health Minister last year for offensive WhatsApp messages. LBC weather clearer in southern and central areas tonight, staying wet and windy further north, a low of 1 degree.
This is LBC. Is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 9:34 on LBC. We're asking, why are so many British children not potty trained by the time they start school? I've got no information as to whether this is an epidemic that's happening all over Europe. I suspect it isn't. I suspect that we are top, or would it be bottom of the league table here? I don't believe that this is happening in Germany. Maybe somebody can have a look at, see if there are any comparable statistics for that. 0345 6060 973. A text here says, how many of these parents have pets? Do they let them pee and poop all over the house? We train our pets within weeks. Babies should be taught at the earliest stage of development, preferably as soon as they start walking. Well, I'm glad you've said that, because if I'd said it, I think I would have had hell to pay, because people don't like it when I compare pets to children. Let's go to Joe, who's in North Ayrshire. Hello, Joe.
Oh, hi, Ian. I
Hello.
do love your show. I've listened most nights. I really enjoy it.
Oh, thank you.
I just think this whole thing is so sad. I've got grown-up children and grandchildren. All were potty trained really, really young, as soon as they were physically able. But I was at home with my children. I mean, I worked. First 2 years I took in typing. The second 2 years I was a registered childminder, so that I could be at home with my children. And with small children, you have to know the signs of when they're ready to go to the toilet. And there will be signs like, they're wiggling around or they're getting a bit anxious or whatever. And that needs a consistent person there. So I was able to do it. My daughter was able to do that with her children. But I feel so sorry that for people who have no choice but to go out to work, both parents, whether it's both parents or someone who's ended up in a single parent situation, they might be leaving the house at like 7:30 in the morning to drop the children at nursery or a childminder or a childcare situation. Then they might have to commute an hour to work, do a day's work, hours commute home, pick up the child. Then it's bedtime, and I feel like we're probably unfairly castigating parents who are trying to do their best, literally just keep a roof over their head, but are forced to be away from their children to be able to keep them, warm and dry and safe.
I'm sorry. I think you're excusing parents too much there, because the children, if the parents aren't able to be at home for the reasons that you suggest, and I completely accept there are many people who are struggling with the cost of living at the moment, but presumably the children are being looked after by somebody else, and so they are with them all of that time, whether it's a grandparent, a childminder. I mean, is it too much to ask for the parents to sort of almost delegate the task to those people?
Well, but that's sort of what I was saying back at the beginning, is that you need consistency. You need someone who's children develop week by week. One week they can do something, the next week, they've moved on to the next stage, and you have to be really, really consistent. And I think a lot of the time, what happens is, say the child might be sort of dropped off at a nursery where the ratio will be. I'm not sure what the ratios are now, but it could very easily be 5 children to 1 adult. I don't know what the current thing is. Ditto with a childminder. So that might be a few days a week. One day it might be, I don't know, like granny. The next day it might be, daddy in the morning and someone else in the afternoon. There's a lot of mixing around, where people are just juggling stuff. And you see that when you know people, you can see how difficult it is. They're trying to juggle all this childcare because it's so expensive. And so the child doesn't get any consistency. I'm not excusing it, and I'm certainly not excusing anyone who sits around at home on the backside doing nothing all day. But I just think that in the early years, we forget that children need consistency. They really, really, really need their mum or their parent, whoever their main parent is, their main carer, or even if it's like one adult, one paid carer. They need that consistently throughout the week, not just here, there, and being ferried around everywhere.
You're absolutely right, Joe. Where are you in North Ayrshire exactly?
Oh, On the west coast, opposite the Isle of Arran, and it's absolutely beautiful. Because I think you have a sort of a connection to.
Well, that's why I asked. I was wondering if you were anywhere near Stewarton, which is where my family come from. But
oh, right. I'm not, although it's not that far from me. But funny enough, because I was born in London and moved up here only a few years ago, and it was only when I came up here. I knew I had a Scottish granny, but when I moved up here and looked into my family history, that I realised that all my family from one side of my family were all from this area. So we may even be related.
You never know. Well, there were a lot of Dales in Stewarton in the 1760s.
Oh, right, yes, I took mine all the way back as well, and I'll have to look up where Stewarton is, but yes, so I've got family, ancestors going back hundreds and hundreds of years back all around this area as well. So you never know. We could be second cousin removed.
Well, I have had people contact me who say, "Oh, I'm your sixth cousin." So it's been absolutely fascinating, and I've actually met a couple of them as well. Joe, thank you very much indeed. Now we're going to come back to your calls on this in just a second, but I want to talk a little bit about the fact that there's been a fourth train crash in 5 days in Spain. Now, none of them seem to be connected, but 4 train crashes in 5 days is quite something. I think we pride ourselves in this country that we have an excellent safety record on the train. It's very rare you hear about a railway accident nowadays, and long may it remain so. Let's talk to Christian Wolmar, railway commentator and historian and author of many books on the railways. Christian, great to have you on the show again. This is quite something, isn't it? Because no one sort of thinks of Spanish railways as being intrinsically unsafe. But what do you make of the fact that there have been so many crashes? Is it just coincidence?
I think it is. I mean, look, one of them is a major disaster, a high-speed train crash, which is completely unprecedented. We haven't had a crash in the world like that with actually 2 high-speed trains crashing into each other full speed. I've just written a book called Fast Track, and luckily it hasn't gone into production yet, because in it I wrote that there hadn't been such a crash, but I did write, oddly enough, that maybe by the time you read this, there will have been a crash. And so now there has been, and so I will rewrite that chapter. But that was completely exceptional. And these other crashes are pretty minor affairs, the sort of things that have routinely happened on the railways quite a lot. In one, I think the driver was killed. I think in the others, there's just been some injuries. And they're the sort of mishaps that used to happen with great frequency on the railways. And we've only noticed these ones in Spain because of this major disaster and the fact that there is this coincidence. But look, as you know, Iain, you used to do some work for the railways. You know full well that the railways are the safest form of land travel, much safer than being in your car per 1,000 miles or whatever. They are extremely safety conscious. Even places like India, where there used to be a lot of crashes, nowadays are far safer. So we very rarely hear about rail accidents. So when something like the Spanish accident happens, of course, it's kind of, full-on news. If it hadn't been actually for Trump and all the Greenland shenanigans, we would have, it would have been the front page news and ahead of the news bulletins. That it is exceptional. And as you say, and we should emphasize, we have not had a fatal, well, we've had one multi-fatal crash in the last 20 years in this country, and that was caused by a landslip in Scotland. That's an extraordinary record, given that in the 20th century there were train crashes every year.
Now, the Spanish Train Drivers Union, they've called for a 3-day strike nationwide starting on the 9th of February. Given that these crashes seem to be unconnected, I'm not quite sure what that will achieve and what the logic is.
I saw that and I didn't really understand. Maybe they are worried that there is something to do with track maintenance, because my suspicion, we haven't found out yet what caused the high-speed crash, but it does sound like it was a rail that broke underneath the train as it was going along, and that's down to poor maintenance. Older listeners might remember the Hatfield train crash, which was actually caused in the same way at about 100 miles an hour by a rail that broke underneath the train. So they might be kind of anxious about the state of maintenance on the Spanish railways. But, we have to look at Spanish railways. They built 5,000 kilometers of high-speed lines over the past 3 years, and they have a wonderful railway system, as I'm sure you know if you've traveled on it. It's kind of far more modern than ours, and they have this whole network of high-speed trains. So, it's a bit of a shame that the drivers have responded in that way.
Thank you very much, Christian. When's that book out, Fast Track?
The book out is in June, and my next book after that will be about the Cape to Cairo Railway. So I'm a busy boy, Ian.
Well, you are. Well, that'd be a great one to research. Does that mean you have to spend a lot of time in Egypt?
I'm heading off. Well, I'm heading off to I'm in Cape Town in April to ride up. I won't be able to ride up because most of the railways have closed, but I'll be travelling up all the way to Dar es Salaam along the line.
Oh, wow.
And we'll have a fantastic time, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm very jealous. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Christian Wolmar there, railway commentator and author. Back to potty training. I was very tempted to ask Christian about that, but I resisted the temptation, which I'm sure he's grateful for. Rebecca says, my son had to be toilet trained before starting nursery in 2006. He was dry through the day by that point, and we worked on nights at a slightly slower pace. If the basic requirements were not met, then the kids couldn't attend. Why aren't grandparents pulling their kids up for letting their grandchildren down? Parenting books or TikToks should be handed out at birth. Right, we'll come to more of your calls and texts in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. Do you have an explanation as to why it's 25%. I mean, the majority of parents are very responsible. Well, in fact, 3/4 of parents are doing the right thing and training their children how to use toilets and potties before they go to school. But 1 in 4 are not. I mean, I could urge anybody who's in the 1 in 4 part of that to give me a call and tell me about the difficulties. I mean, maybe you've just tried your best, but it just hasn't worked. It's 9:46.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Donald Trump unveils his Board of Peace to rebuild Gaza, but is this a well-intentioned plan or simply a US land grab? Plus, is Andy Burnham about to challenge Keir Starmer for his job?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app. Dale on LBC.
9:49 is the time on LBC. So we're talking about why so few children arrive at reception classes unable to have been potty trained. Now, I got very aerated at the beginning of the hour saying that I totally blame the parents, and I still do. I don't see what other explanation there is. No one has yet provided me with another explanation. We've had one or two people sort of give a few reasons at the margins of why parents might be too busy to properly parent their children, in which case you have to question why they've had a child in the first place, don't you? Claire says, I work in reception year with children aged 4 to 5, and last year toileting became such a drain on staff resources that after calculating how much time was taken up with changing children, presumably changing children's nappies, we made a case to the senior leadership to employ another member of staff whose sole job was to change children who had had accidents. Oh my God. I mean, who would want to apply for that job? The shutdown of the Sure Start centres was a massive failure of government and has a lot to answer for. I think that would have to rate as one of the worst jobs to have, wouldn't it? I mean, even if you are just devoted to children, I can't imagine that you'd really want to devote your day wholly to changing nappies, but I may be wrong. Vivian says, in Germany, they do have a growing problem with children coming to school still in nappies. But of course, children start school later, 6 to 7 there, and 5 can be a bit early for some children. Before starting school, children have a test of school readiness by a paediatrician, and those not deemed ready can be sent to a special kindergarten for a year if necessary. Well, that's an interesting perspective. It is true that children do start school much later in some European countries. I think it's in Finland. I think it's 7 years old. I'm sure there are nurseries, but the actual school start is actually at the age of 7. Howard says, here in France, if your child isn't clean, they're not allowed to attend school. Well, I think there's a big case for doing that here. Phil says children should not be punished by excluding them from school. Instead, if your child is not toilet trained, except if there is a significant medical reason, then the parents should be in attendance to take their child to the toilet as and when needed. It is not the child's fault. It isn't the child's fault. You're absolutely right. But the practicalities of having the parents present when the child happens to want to go to the loo, I mean, that just wouldn't work, would it? And there'd have to be surely some sort of, there would be criminal records implications for that, I would have thought as well. Joe says, too many families where both parents have to work so barely see their children, I expect. I'm not excusing that, but suspect it plays a part. Ditto single parents who have to work all day rather than be with their children. The children then get farmed out to places with too many children to one adult. Let's go to John in Greenwich. Hello, John.
Yeah, I mean, what about the amount of money parents are paying for these nurseries? These nurseries should be taking the kids on skiing holidays. I mean, you know, so what? They're getting paid enough money, and most of their salaries being paid for the kids to go into the nurseries, paying thousands, shed loads of money to them. So what? They've got enough time to train the kids and potty train them. You know, the parents are paying. Like I said, they should be going on skiing holidays. You know, give the parents a break. The amount of money they're paying. Do you not think it is a basic duty of a parent to potty train their child? Let me ask you a question. Ben Kenny's just had a baby, right? Yeah. I'm sure unless he's got like nieces or nephews where he might have changed their nappies, but he's never changed a nappy in his life. I'm not talking about a disposable slip-on nappy. I'm talking about a towel nappy with a safety pin in it. Yeah, right. So he's got to learn, right? And he's going to make mistakes. Maybe the milk's too hot. He hasn't tested it or something. You know, I mean, you know, no one trains you to be a parent growing up. These are things that you have to learn. Well, that is all very true. But the fact is, if you're going to have a baby,
you surely have a basic understanding of what you need to do to care for that baby. And particularly when it's reached the age of 2 or 3, you know that that's the age when a child has to be potty trained. And if you don't know that, then you presumably buy a book which tells you what the basic duties of a parent are, which include teaching a child to brush its teeth as well, which teachers are now having to do.
Hang on. So we send kids to school to get an education.
Exactly.
But we're telling the teachers it's not your job to teach them hygiene. Right? It's not their job to teach them hygiene. Is that what you're saying? You're saying that teachers' job is not to teach children hygiene or how to go to the toilet or,
Yeah, I mean, teachers are there to teach children to read, write and count.
Okay, so if you don't teach children hygiene, you were talking about when their teachers were teaching the children how to brush their teeth, yeah? Right? A lot of parents maybe that they don't know how to teach their children, because to teach somebody something, you have to be equipped and you have to be a teacher. That's why you're called a teacher. Parents aren't teachers. Parents are parents. They're not teachers. They don't know everything, do they? They don't know how to teach their, they don't know how to teach their children to do certain things like brush their teeth because they're not trained to.
Oh, don't be so silly. Of course, that is a basic requisite of a parent, to know the things that you do need to teach your children.
Some parents don't know, but some parents don't know how to cook.
Well, then they need to learn what they need to do, don't they?
Yeah, but to cook a healthy meal or to make sure their kids get enough exercise or whatever. But what are they going to do next? Start finding the parents whose children turn up dirty to school, or whose children. Why don't the school come alongside the parents and a parents' evening and speak to the parents and say, look, do you need help to teach your children to potty train? Do you need, don't beat up on the parents.
I'm sorry, I do. Anybody that has a child has a basic responsibility to look after their child, and that includes potty training. It includes teaching the child how to brush their teeth. It does also, I think, include helping the child to read at home, to learn what a book is. And we've heard all sorts of stories in this hour that children don't even know what a book is now because they've never seen one before they go to school. That is outrageous, John. Mandy says, toweling nappies were a lot of work, so we potty trained our babies as soon as possible. Maybe the convenience of disposable nappies has affected this. Well, that is probably very true. Bridget is a first-time caller in Greenwich. Hi, Bridget.
Hi, Ian.
Hello.
Yeah. So thank you for taking my call.
Not at all.
Really interesting subject. So one that's very dear to my heart, actually. So I've got 4 kids and they were all potty trained by the time they were 3 years old. And I think you're completely right. It's the parents' responsibility solely to potty train their child. And I work full time, I had to go to work, kids went to nursery, and the nursery actually worked with parents to support them in potty training. So they would advise you if they felt your child was ready, but if you wanted to do it a bit earlier, it's all about support, consistency, and it worked. So I don't understand why parents wouldn't do that. And like you said, it's the basic requisite for a parent to be able to potty train, to be able to brush their child's teeth, to be able to get their child to clothe themselves. So I'm just not sure what the other argument is, really.
But what can be done about it? Clearly, this is now an epidemic, a phenomenon. And therefore, if teachers are going to be allowed to teach what they're there to teach rather than this sort of thing, something has got to change somewhere. Is it basically providing much more education for parents?
Yeah, I think it is providing education, but I think the difficulty is when parents don't want to engage. So I can't say that there isn't the education there already. There are a lot of children's centres which are still open, even regardless of Shore Start being closed down. So it's about parents engaging. My kids go to a school which offers parents loads of opportunities, and it's just not taken up. So a lot of the time it is laziness. And that's just it. So I don't want to say we should be fining parents, but something where the parent needs to see this is your responsibility. And if it's a case of, when your child has those yearly checks and the monitoring checks, the health visitors have that conversation, and you have to start showing that you are engaging, and that's what you're doing, building those blocks for your child to be able to enter school. And, because it's embarrassing as well for their peers watching them. So, I think we just need to do as parents better for our kids.
Bridget, thank you very much indeed. Sid is an example of somebody who's not very happy. He says, is this the best topic you can talk about with so much going on in the world right now? Well, sometimes you have to have a bit of light and shade, Sid. I don't know about you, but I did not want to do 3 hours on Donald Trump tonight. I'm a bit trumped out by the end of the week, so I thought we'd do something a little bit different, but obviously you don't agree. Thank you for all of your calls and messages this evening and throughout this week. I'll be back on Monday evening from 7. If you missed any of this evening's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, which you can download now for free from your app store. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Clive Ball, but right now, here's a man who's got a lot of nappy changing ahead of him.
Oh, endlessly. I can't get away from it. I come to work and talk about nappies. Thank you very much indeed.
Iain Dale, it is Ben Kentish here with you on LBC this Thursday night on the show.
Everybody wants to be a part of it. The official formation of what is known